Hello again, friends! And you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here on another sunny day here in the spring in some parts of the country. I understand it's wet and cold in other places, but here we are. I'm the great Brian Last, your host. We're going to ask your questions, and we're going to hear reviews from this man, the leader of the cult of Cornette, Mr. Jim Cornette.
That was lackluster, lacking in life and spontaneity, entertainment value, and overall oomph, Brian Last. I'm almost falling out of my chair here. I can't believe you just handed me off a cold tag on the podcast. This is your show.
That's right.
You should be wanting the ratings to skyrocket. You should create some anticipation. You should have the people on the edge of their seat, like I used to have Tommy Noe doing in the Smoky Mountain Wrestling radio commercials. The last line was, "We'll sell you the whole seat, but all you'll need is the edge." I stole that off some fucking race car.
That's a good line.
Commercial, yeah. I heard, but it is a good line, right? And sometimes they didn't even use any part of the seat. But that just goes to show you never can tell about some people. I'm grumpy today. I have a new mortal enemy, a new bane of my existence, a new harbinger of doom hanging around me, an albatross around my neck, a curse placed on me, a foe that mocks me at every turn wherever I go, a Moriarty-like adversary, Brian Last, I'll have you know.
Is this an animal or a human being?
It's neither.
No.
My new bane of my existence is cardboard.
Okay.
Cardboard. Every piece of bad news that I get, or disruption in my plans, or some bump in my road, in my highway to peacefulness, in my retirement sooner possibly than later. It's cardboard. First, a week before last. You know how much cardboard comes in? I'm a good, responsible citizen, first of all. We recycle here at the castle. We recycle not only the cans and the bottles and the various containers that our foodstuffs and our daily supplies for life come in. And of course, that's a residential type thing. We got the recycling bin. We put it down there. They pick it up. That's seamless, right? But there's a lot of cardboard recycling coming from the Cornette's collectibles end of the castle. And normally, for the past however long, because I got Black Beauty, holds a lot of stuff. Last year, I had the Monroe brothers. Once a week, they were going down to the recycling dump down at the fire department, because that's where I was going with this. Down the road from me, my little formerly peaceful street that's now like Pet Cemetery, and you take your life in your hands just pulling out in an armored vehicle. But my former little, down the street, a mile and a half, is the fire department. That's a handy thing. Where they also have the dumpsters, the Dempster dumpsters, as we used to say, that you take your recycling to, your cans and your cardboard and your things of that nature. And I go through a lot you have seen some of the pictures in the past.
I have.
Of my garage, the various cartons and boxes of figures that we go through and various things. So as I said, I'm a responsible citizen. I not only use my left and right turn indicators in my car, but also I recycle for the good of the planet. And I've been doing this for years now. So week before last, I go down there with an entire Ford Expedition full of cardboard, not just boxes, but actually cut up, flattened out cardboard boxes. So a whole SUV, it's several cubic feet, I don't know how many. And I pull right in there, and guess what I saw? I saw no dumpsters. I saw a sign, just a cold, after the relationship I've had with this recycling dump for 10 years now or more. A cold, emotionless sign that said, "This location is closed forever." Well, what am I supposed to do? Then I start reading the fine print. I had to get out and stare at it. Next recycling location, blah, 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 next closest, right? which it's only 7 miles away. That may not seem like a big deal until you take into account that it's 7 miles down one of the busiest streets in town, especially at this end of town, and across and into a goddamn park somewhere. So basically, now to get rid of my cardboard, I'm expected to be a good citizen, to help prolong the scant few years that we've got left on this planet until we can't breathe the air or drink the water. And I got to do a 45-minute round trip drive to throw shit away now. Do you think that's acceptable?
When I was in Long Beach on Long Island, I was kind of spoiled. And if this wasn't the way it went, I apologize to the very nice sanitation people. But it was basically put all your recycling out on one day. Just put it all out. They'll take care of it. And they did. When I moved to New Jersey, it was you could put all the bottles out, but you have to take the cardboard yourself to a place and dump each individual thing in individual places.
Oh, that's getting a little too down into the minutiae.
Yeah, this was bullshit. I was like, I'm not doing this. Fuck this. So then it got a little better. And now you have to put everything out there. You have to flatten it. It has to be in certain containers. It's just so many rules. Just take my shit and recycle it.
Well, see, we get a bin to put the stuff in, and then they just pick it up with the truck comes by with the grabby thing and picks it up and dumps it into the goddamn. As a matter of fact, one time a garbage guy dumped the bin and everything into the back of the garbage truck. I jumped in the car and chased him down, flagged him. I said, "Hey, you got my goddamn guy." He said, "Well, I know it got stuck. We'll have to bring you a new one." But for the residential part, they give you the bin for whatever. But this, if I put this down at the road, it'd be a traffic hazard. It would block traffic if it blew over, right? This is a lot of shit. So now I'm having the Monroes again. I don't know where they're taking it. It doesn't have to go home, but it can't stay here. But then, again, cardboard. Everywhere I turned the last time, but before we put the action figures on sale at JimCornette.com, more on this in a moment, I stocked up with boxes. We got all of our assembly line procedures together and everything. We got our plan down. And when I'd ordered the boxes, then they sent me an email. I won't mention the name of the company. I was just telling the Featherbottoms, this company has been wonderful. They're the only people I never have a problem with. The only people I've ever done business with for my shipping supplies. They're boom, 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 just like that. Their telephone ordering is impeccable. And then as soon as the Featherbottoms come aboard, here we go. It's not their fault, but it's the supply chain. I don't know how the supply chain affects different sizes of cardboard. It would seem like either you can get cardboard or you can't get cardboard. But what has happened is there's a certain size of box that fits an individual action figure. For example, the sold-out bloody variant that went like fucking hotcakes. And you can imagine how good hotcakes go. Well, that needs a 12 by 8 by 3, Brian Last, 12 by 8 by 3 box. And I call and I order the 12 by 8 by 3 boxes. And they send me an email after the fact saying, "I'm sorry, we're out of the stock of these and don't know when we'll get them. So for the same price, we're sending you a 12 by 8 by 4. Now, that may not seem like a big deal to you. However, it's thrown the entire assembly line process into turmoil. Not only because it takes an extra inch, Brian, of packing peanuts to fill that extra inch of space, but also all of the larger boxes that we have that we carry these smaller boxes in to the Featherbottoms and to the post office and the whole 9 yards. Well, goddamn, now they don't fit there either in the same configuration. And this has just brought turmoil upon us. So, just this morning, I called because now that we know that we have sold an abundant more action figures than we got the boxes for, I'm going to see if they got the right boxes, and I'm going to stock up on those. And I call and I say, I talk to the boxing madam on the 800 number. If a person who you get fish from is a fishmonger, and the person you get meat from is the meat gentleman, that the person you get your boxing supplies from is a boxing madam, right?
I don't know about that.
Makes perfect sense.
No, it doesn't.
And I asked the boxing madam, I said, the last time I called for this particular item, you were out of stock. Do you have it in stock now? Oh, yes, we do. Oh, well, then I'll take another 500 of those, please. Thank you very much. And I make that order along with the more peanuts. And then I'll have you know that they sent me an email 15 minutes later. We're out of stock of this, so we're sending you the 12 by 8x4. So now I've got 1,000 of these boxes that are an inch too big, and I'm going to have to fucking use more peanuts, which is going to accelerate the downfall of the environment because of the peanuts being styrofoam.
Why do you have to use peanuts?
Well, because you can't just have valuable collector's items just bouncing around willy-nilly in their containers.
There are other options than peanuts.
Well, what are they then?
You can have a slab of air bubbles.
The air bubbles don't fit in the proper configuration, then I'd have to make the boxes even bigger.
Even the smaller ones, if you folded it up?
Well, then you're also getting into plastic, and now you're going to kill the goddamn dolphins. What have you got against the dolphins?
You think styrofoam's better than plastic?
Well, at least they don't get it hung around their little necks.
What about paper? You ever see when they have like the shredded paper in bunches?
Yeah, that creates a mess. Nobody wants that in their fucking house.
That's probably the best in terms of recycling, the best in terms of the environment.
Yeah, but it's not the best in terms of vacuuming.
So what comes first, the vacuuming or the environment?
Well, you can't live in a fucking pigsty. That's your primary environment.
After this, I have no idea what your take is on this issue. You took both sides.
What are you, some kind of knucklehead or something? But anyway, so cardboard is cursing me everywhere I go. But the good news is there's a lot of cardboard going out to the Cornette's Collectibles customers this week. I'll have you know that in conjunction with the Feather Bottoms, not only are all of the orders to like for T-shirts and autographed photos, Cult of Cornette membership certificates, that type of thing, they're going out and will continue to go out without a backlog because they've got this assembly line process going that takes me a negligible amount of time to do that. So we're going to keep those going while the figures are being signed, and the first couple of hundred figures orders are going to be going at what day is it? What time is this? I don't even know what the fuck I've done. But by the time you hear this, Fanny and Felcher Featherbottom will probably be in their truck. Well, you ought to see that piece of work. RockAuto.com couldn't even save it. On the way to the post office with the first couple of hundred figures going out, and more to come as we now have gotten full speed up to date onto this thing. So again, folks, if you want a Jim Cornette official Jim Cornette commentator playset, the brand new playset from Figures Toy Company, there are less than 500 or so of those available now. The bloody variants, as we mentioned, sold out in 36 hours. It'll take me longer than that to sign them and mail them, but you're all locked in, folks. You got your confirmations. So anyway, if you want anything else, JimCornette.com. But the figures are underway. We have gotten started with this process. And as my mama Cornette used to say, it won't be as long as it's been. And this won't take me as long as I don't think as it has in the past. I got actually an email from a kind customer over across the pond, one of the international orders. And God dang it, I've lost his name now. But nevertheless, he said, also, I want to compliment you on the packing job. A brick couldn't have harmed this package. That's what we're striving for. We want these things to be impervious to bricks and physical assaults. What do you got?
I got a bunch of questions here.
Should we talk about Blood and Fire?
Blood and Fire. That's the brand new book by Brian Solomon. It's about to come out.
It's by the time that you people, I don't mean to sound like that. You know, that's a northern thing too. Down south, they say you all or you guys, but up north, they say you people. And it's like a looking down your nose type of fucking remark to me. I always took it sideways when somebody would just say out of the blue, well, what do you people like to eat? Well, the fucking same thing as human beings do, I guess. But anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, by the time the people hear this, we got nothing else to fucking talk about. By the time the people hear this, they will actually be able to purchase Blood and Fire, the biography of the Sheik by Brian Solomon. April 12th is the release date, and I bet you that it's going to be April 12th when the people are hearing this.
All right, well, congratulations.
So go to Amazon or wherever you do these things.
Congratulations, Brian Solomon. Everyone should read this book.
Yeah, well, congratulate him when everybody does read the book. Don't just congratulate him now on a fucking
the release.
potential.
No, you get congratulated on the release.
Congratulations on your release of your book, Brian. It wasn't released; it escaped, and now it's out causing terror and panic wherever it goes. What would you if the Sheik book is released and immediately runs under a bus and hides? That would be. You see, you didn't pop at all on that.
No, I didn't.
That's a famous story, folks, that you'll hear about the Sheik in Chicago when you read this fascinating book that apparently Brian is not enjoying my material on. But
well, your material's all right.
Yeah.
All
well,
right.
It's your show.
It is my show, and we have lots of questions, as I've said several times. We also have a couple of reviews. Or reviews, as they are called in English. We have a couple of reviews to get out of the way here. Why don't we start with Smackdown? Because I know you watched it.
I was afraid you'd say that.
And thankfully, there was a lot to fast forward through. Even I'm admitting it. But there were some things noteworthy on the program worth talking about.
Well, there were. And actually, it was a bit more refreshing this week because for the last couple of weeks, we've been inundated with wrestling and more wrestling. And it was hard to see the forest for the trees or separate the wheat from the chaff or the dreck from the non-dreckish material. What is the opposite of dreck?
I don't know.
What is dreck separated from? What is dreck the leftover of, or the remainder of, or the residue of? Where do you get dreck?
I don't know.
Hold on, this is an interesting question that I'm about to. Hold on, the American Heritage 3rd edition dictionary, just real quick.
Will dreck be in the dictionary? That's another question.
Well, it's, of course, there's a lot of dreck in the dictionary. There's a lot of dreck in every book and everything. Dredge, see, you're getting close to the dreck when you're dredging. The dregs, the sediment in a liquid, the least desirable portion. That's the dregs. But wait a minute. Dreck isn't in here. Well, I've been hearing dreck for years. Apparently, dreck is just an informal version of dregs.
I'm looking here, according to the online dictionary. Dreck is informal for rubbish or trash.
Well, there you go. Didn't I just say informal?
Yeah, but you were trying to figure out what it was actually the residue of. What dirty item is this the residue of?
So it's just in general trash. Okay.
Yes.
Well, let's separate some of the good things from the general trash.
By the way, it's
Smackdown.
Yiddish. It's Yiddish.
Well, there you see. Do you think I have some Yiddish blood?
No. Oh, no.
No?
No.
Not at all?
Not even any, no.
How would I be able to tell? What would be a symptom?
You're so goyim. I mean, you can tell.
I'm what? I'm goyim?
Not Jewish.
Well, all right. I thought the goyim was a mythical mud monster. Oh, that's the golem.
This has been our segment on words here this week.
Words are important. Words are so important in your speeches and language. You couldn't make a speech without using words. So let me use some in describing.
We were going to talk about Smackdown if you don't remember.
Smackdown on April the 8th. It started with Ronda Rousey. And I I'm sorry. I don't mean, again, we liked the concept of Ronda Rousey when she hadn't come back because, it'd be another big star added to the mix. Before, in previous days, she always talked, when she first got into business, she always talked about what a big fan she was. I mean, and Roddy Piper was her idol and blah, blah, blah. But on this one, they've told her to smile, which I don't agree with. Like I said, I love her game face, but they told her to smile and shake hands. But otherwise, she looks about as thrilled to be there as I do when I'm pulling into my fucking dentist's office. In her promos, she's now kind of nasally, as well as putting no oomph into it. She's making her statements that it's been suggested to her that she make. She doesn't look comfortable doing it. And it was a short promo, and she always has somebody usually in there now with her to fill in the blank spots, because she'll make a statement and then just leave the end of the participle just dangling in midair and kind of look around. And the summation of the gist of her statement was she wants an I Quit match with Charlotte at Backlash, because they showed the clip where she made Charlotte tap out when the referee was inadvertently detained elsewhere at WrestleMania, and now she wants to do it again. Before we talk about Charlotte, you saw it, or did you see this? Am I just rambling to a mud fence here who didn't see it?
Well, some have called me worse, but you are rambling to someone who saw it. I saw it.
Okay. Did I describe it any differently than you might have seen Ronda Rousey's participation in this?
It's negative charisma. And you said she had no oomph. It was to the point where if the crowd actually made any noise, you wouldn't have been able to hear her. She was just putting no emphasis on anything. And I think at some point you have to say, do we keep doing this if she doesn't improve? And then we could just say she failed at it? Or do we stop doing any in-ring promos with her and just do something else that's more effective, like some kind of video, a vignette, something that shows her kicking ass, shows her being tough, shows her being a badass, not showing her talk like this.
Well, and I don't think, when you said she's not improving or what, I'm not saying that she stinks naturally. I'm saying that this seems to be, for a big-time wrestling fan, it was such a wrestling, and her friends, Marina and Shayna, and what was the other girl's name? The Four Horsewomen. She's not trying. Jessamine. She's not trying. She's not into this. She's not thrilled doing this. She's not enjoying it. Something's going on where it's not, because if you're a wrestling fan, she would be out there, unless they've told her, don't put any emotion in this whatsoever. Don't go out there and hot dog in any way. Don't. I don't. It just doesn't look to me like that she's caring about it or whatever. There's something going on. Is she over it now? She's done the wrestling thing. Now she's contractually obligated.
Turner. That's the other thing. Maybe if she could do heel promo in the ring, maybe she could do better with that material. Because this shy baby face, I mean, I don't understand why they think this would work. It's not working at all. And when I was listening to the material, and it was like, my mom told me, you got to beat them twice, and I only beat her once. And I'm putting as much emphasis in it as she did.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't like, and my mother, with all the things that she taught me, and the most important. No, it wasn't. It was like, yeah, Mama said. Mama says it bees that way sometimes. But then, and everybody says, oh, he's in love with Charlotte. Cornette is.
Yes, they do say that.
Because of Flair or what? No. She came on screen and perked this up. If she is not the best heel promo of any female in the wrestling business, who is right now, off the top of your head?
Britt Baker?
I don't know now whether Britt is an entertaining heel promo. And by the way, have we heard her talk at any length in a while? We couldn't shut her up for a while there, and now we don't. But
she's been off the show since she lost the belt.
Well, exactly. But the point is, she's an entertaining promo. But is she an entertaining babyface promo because she does an entertaining heel? I'm talking about being a bitch, a heel. Condescending. Charlotte is articulate and well-spoken, but she also has that aloof. She's not being a funny smartass girl. She's being the nature's daughter. And that, to me, it took you a while to think of Britt Baker. Can you think of anybody else? I'll give you that Britt's in the conversation in a different fashion.
Becky Lynch?
Becky Lynch is the other one. And I, again, don't know that anybody is the straight up classic heel. She's the nature girl. She's the Buddy Rogers. She's the Ric Flair. She's the classic bleach blonde heel in wrestling that thinks they're better than everybody else because they are better looking. They've got a better body. They make more money. They wear better clothes. I mean, she's taken the fucking Miss Olivia robes to a ridiculous extreme.
She has an advantage over her dad, though, in the sense that he was fantastic. But at a certain point, the people wanted to cheer him and they were never going to stop wanting to cheer him. I don't see that happening with her. So she can be a heel and stay a heel. Rick wanted to be a heel, but he couldn't stay a heel or really truly be a heel after a while because people are going to cheer him even if he attacks the biggest babyface. Yeah.
And here's the thing. Now that the people are all smart, a lot of people in Flair's day, when they started cheering him, weren't smart, but they had to cheer him even though he was a heel because he was a cool heel. And like you said, the talent and the whole 9 yards. Now the same thing. Everybody's smart. And instead of cheering her because she's good at her job, they're booing her because they're buying the fucking heel. I don't understand it. But anyway, the point is, Charlotte perked this up. And Ronda answered her, and the best part of that was her mean face that she made at the end. Maybe that should just be the package, a collage of Ronda Rousey's mean faces. Because those make her look like fucking second coming of Chucky or something. That, and my name is Talkie Ronda, and I am going to kill you. You believe it. That's, But anyway, that was that interview segment.
Yes, it was.
And that was over with quick. And then here comes Butch. And who called him? One of the announcers called him Pete.
Yeah.
Corrected himself. But poor Pete, what did Pete do to anybody? So he's Butch, and Holland, and I think they ought to just broke down and called him Holland, Dozier, and Holland. But Ridge Holland and Sheamus are with Butch as he wrestled Xavier Woods, and that was a match that happened. It's preposterous. Zayn is complaining now that he lost to Johnny Knoxville because of interference and wants to regain people's respect, and he'll fight the next person that walks through the door. That's what he's telling Adam Pearce. And of course, Drew McIntyre walks through the door. Can we declare a moratorium in wrestling? I think the WWE is the main offender. But how long have you seen this? They don't do it as much as the fight in the parking lot, but I'll fight the next person that walks through that door. And the next person that walks through that door is never the goddamn craft services fucking attendant or the goddamn janitor, but some giant behemoth.
Or Mae Young.
For fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Or Mae Young. Anyways, now we got to part of the good part. Which one is Ludwig Kaiser? Was he Marcel or Fabian?
I wasn't sure. I was actually hoping you would know. Because the other day on NXT to recap, and it's hard to remember all this, even though it was less than a week ago as we were recording, one of the Imperium members turned on the other one, and then Walter lost to Braun Breaker. And I thought that other guy, okay, now he's out of Imperium. Now it's going to be Walter and the other heel guy that turned on him. Nope, that guy's with Walter now. I don't know what happened to the other guy.
Wait a minute, the one that turned on him. All right. Anywho, Ludwig Kaiser, who is either Fabian or Marcel in a previous existence on the other brand on the same network. No, this is SmackDown. They're on a different network. He is in a spotlight and he introduces the man who is the epitome of efficiency and elegance. That sounds like the big build for fucking Liberace, doesn't it?
Efficiency and elegance. I guess so, yeah.
The epitome of efficiency and elegance. And then he did it in German too, and out comes, of course, it's Walter. They're calling him Gunther, but not the fans that are chanting Walter.
McAfee tried to cover up for that. Did you hear that? He goes, they're chanting Gunther. No, they were clearly chanting Walter.
There's no L in Gunther. So what foolishness, I'm thinking. And here comes Walter in a giant red overcoat that looked like, it looked like the same style that Mary Tyler Moore would wear in the early 60s Dick Van Dyke show. With the big buttons on the front and everything. It's
a Halston.
Is it supposed to be reminiscent somehow of a military type uniform or what?
Yes, Stalin-esque.
But anyway, and the other fella, old Ludwig, they should have just called him Ludwig Borga. That would have got some heat somewhere. He's dressed in a tracksuit still, kind of, right? It's this matching colors, but he's in a... So I don't know what their deal is, but he still looks badass. Even if they change his name, they put him in fucking Rosemary's fashions, whatever, he still looks badass. And they showed B-roll of his action highlights, and then this was exactly what should be done. They matched him up on his first appearance on SmackDown with the up-and-comer Joe Alonzo. Brian, did you see any of Joe Alonzo's previous matches?
I've never heard of him before, never saw him before.
Exactly. You're probably not going to see him again because he's a backdrop to show us what Walter does. And that's what he did. He swarmed this guy. He was aggressive. He mauled him. He manhandled him. There was different types of offense than you see from, all the rest of the guys, and he bullied him some, and he hit a few of those hard chops, and he power bombed him, and he stacked him up and beat him 1, 2, 3. Perfect. That's exactly what he should have done his first time on television. You showcase a guy's strengths. You fucking show the people what he can do. You make him look dominant and impressive, and you put in the people's mind, well, I wonder how good he's going to be when he gets in the ring with so-and-so that I like. You don't have him come out and have a fucking 10-minute competitive match with a guy that's been on the television program repeatedly before and lost repeatedly or was competitive repeatedly with fucking middle card guys, because then the people mentally have pigeonholed them. And then they gauge how they take the newcomer by how he interacts with the people that they're familiar with. This is not fucking rocket surgery or brain science. And Walter's got great facials.
It is something, though, seeing the weight loss. Someone posted the other day, I saw on social media, again, before and after, of him, a year ago, year and a half ago, and him now. And it is remarkable, and it is something seeing him in his new physical shape on that show, which looks different than NXT or any of the indies he was working for. I wonder if he would be more effective if he still had some of that weight on him right now. And I also wonder about his gut health.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know for sure, and he reminds me of Killer Kowalski. I was about to say that before
That's
you even
interesting.
took the left turn, because Killer Kowalski, now Walter was a pudgy fellow, still aggressive and big and fearsome looking, but he was pudgy, whereas Kowalski earlier in his career was a bodybuilder with a physique like Tarzan. But then Kowalski went through a period where he decided to change his ways, change his eating habits, change his diet. And so did Walter, in order to drop some weight and be healthier. And you may not be, folks out there, 6'7" like Killer Kowalski, or 6'5" like Walter, or 300 pounds to start out with. But gut health is important, as you mentioned, young Brian Last. You thought I'd never get back to that. Gut health is important, especially determining your prebiotics and your probiotics and your proprietary formulations, because they scientifically study the dosages of these things. And if you're out of sync and out of whack with your probiotics through your prebiotics into your postbiotics and the digestive tract of the bloating and the regularity, you're all screwed up. So how can you get this all back in sync? It's simple. You start with a little seed. That's right, folks. Not a seed you plant, but a seed that you visit, seed.com. Because seed.com is a probiotic, a daily synbiotic with a broad spectrum 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic. So as we've mentioned before many times on the program, you get your pre and your pro in one dose. It's a proprietary formulation of 24 distinct probiotics. That's not that they stink, they're distinct probiotic strains in scientifically studied dosages. And you ought to see these doctors they've got studying this stuff. They put the little thing in their eye like a jeweler, and they look at all those amoebas and all those microscopic organisms, and they figure out what gets through your digestive tract to ensure delivery to your colon. Because a good colon delivery, at least a couple times a week, will help keep everybody in the house in a good mood. It's a proprietary engineered 2-in-1 capsule that protects the probiotics through the digestion to ensure delivery to the colon. Now, folks, if you've, like all of us, if you've taken your probiotics before and you never felt a difference, it's simply because you weren't getting the delivery to your colon. That probiotic was falling out somewhere along the way. Whether it may be for a place that was left open accidentally in your last surgery or just an open orifice, it wasn't going all the way to your colon. Well, the daily synbiotic from Seed is designed differently, and that's why it gets all the way into your colon over and over and over again. And it supports benefits in and beyond the gut, all the way up to your throat sometimes. And that whole thing is connected there. You know, when you think about it, your mouth is really connected to your asshole. What? And there's just a few things in between, but it's pretty much a straight route. So Seed will support ease of bloating, healthy regularity, and ease of evacuation.
There may be some twists and turns.
Well, there's twists and turns in everything, but it's the same. It's the same highway. It's so.
All right, back to the highway.
Yeah, but it supports this highway, folks, from one to the other. And boy, it's easier to go one way on this highway than it is to go the other way. Although, if you tried, I guess you could go all the way down and back, but we don't recommend that return trip. Part of it is unimproved highway. It'll also support your gut barrier, skin health, heart health, and micronutrient synthesis is what this will do for you, this daily synbiotic from Seed. Hey, if you don't believe me, and who would doubt my word after this, then all you got to do is go to seed.com. That's SEED.com/drive and use the code DRIVE to get 20% off your first month of Seed's Daily Symbiotic. You can start a new healthy habit today. That's right, seed.com/drive. Use the code DRIVE. Now, of course, on that highway, we're talking about driving all the way down, but once again, at your own risk, drive all the way back.
That's not how we're ending this spot. Seed, try Seed, ladies and gentlemen. They're a great sponsor.
Yes.
They're obviously
they're
good
the
people.
And also, they give you the tube marked germs that you can.
Not germs, bacteria.
Bacteria. That's
germs.
You've got a tube. It's labeled bacteria, and I want to take that on a commercial plane so bad and hold it up and go, all right, it's going to go this way.
Ladies and gentlemen, check out Seed. Let them know where you heard about them.
Yeah, don't let them know everything you heard, but let them know that we told you to buy their shit. You'll get 20% off if you do.
That's right. What was the link again?
Seed.com/drive and use the code DRIVE.
Well, let's drive back over to SmackDown.
Oh, shit. We're not done yet, are we?
No, we're still dealing. We're still in Eastern Europe.
Still dealing with gut health.
Yeah.
No, we left the European bloc, and now we're. What do you think about that new girl, Raquel Rodriguez?
Do they have to change everything from NXT as soon as it comes up?
Is Raquel Gonzalez her real name?
I do not believe it is. No.
Then in that case, and they named her in Raquel Gonzalez in NXT. And now she's Raquel Rodriguez. Is there I apologize to all the people.
Excuse me. I'm wrong. I want to make a correction because I'm wrong. Let's do this quickly. Her real name is Victoria Gonzalez.
But it's not Raquel Gonzalez.
No, it's Victoria Gonzalez.
So now they've
there's a shred of reality there, so we have to get rid of that.
So they hire her and put her in the NXT program and change her first name and keep her last name. And then they move her again a different place in the same company and change her last name and keep her first name. And again, apologies to people named Gonzalez and Rodriguez, but is there a world of difference?
We don't even talk about the small NXT audience, what they think if they watch SmackDown, how insulting it is that the person you just saw 2 days ago with a different name is there as the same person, but all of a sudden they have a different name. Not even radically different, just a different last name all of a sudden.
Is 30% or 35% of your audience a small audience, though?
No, of course not.
Because actually, if you compare the other company, then the audience for Friday night's normal blase Rampage program is right about 40% of what the Wednesday night programs is. So 30 or 35% of their audience just said, oh, well, there's Raquel Gonzalez, but they call her Raquel Rodriguez. But actually, she may not be the same girl because she doesn't look like it. She went from Raquel Gonzalez about 6 months ago was this badass looking giant bodyguard type with fucking black leather or pleather or whatever and kicking people's ass with dark hair. And this girl looks like she just came back from the fucking strawberry shortcake convention and is just pleased as punch to be there. They've softened everything, the hair, the makeup, the everything. She was wearing a nice, cute little pink top. Glamour girl, Raquel Rodriguez. That's her gimmick.
Towered over Kayla Braxton.
Well, yes, that's another thing. She's got to be 6'2", 6'3", or what? I don't know what kind of boots she's wearing, heels, whatever, but she's bigger than everybody else. So how did Vince not make her a female Diesel? And I mean that in the positive way of the massive push and the, constant promotion, not, just making her a goofy gimmick.
Vince may not have known she existed until he invaded NXT.
Oh boy. Well, but next on SmackDown, we had a would you call this tragic? It's always tragic when friends fall out, when bonds are broken, when people who have had a love and admiration and respect for each other suddenly go awry, or when two job guys with no apparent end to their bit suddenly just decide to fight amongst themselves. Happy and Mosh Pit are no more. Brian, what segments are we going to skip now without Happy and Mosh Pit?
The interesting thing is that the fans were really getting behind Mosh Pit here in this segment.
Oh, yeah, well, they always love the goofy guy.
I want to see what's going to happen. What are they going to do with him as a babyface? Everything with Corbin since he got money. I liked him as a bum. I thought him as a bum was great. It was a great gimmick. He looked the role. It was perfect.
He looks like a bum.
And then he had to go to Vegas and ruin everything. I don't know. How much longer can they run with this Corbin character? He's been like on a road to nowhere for years. He was a king, and then he lost the crown, and he was a bum. Then he got a bunch of money. Then he got a goofy friend. This is like a multi-year thing now. How much longer can this go?
I'm hoping not long. But Happy apparently blames Mosh Pit for losing, or for his loss at WrestleMania when, he lost to Drew McIntyre, and he's mad because Mosh Pit won the Andre Battle Royal and then caused him to lose. He's getting too big for his suspenders. And I guess the WWE audience just now, or these days, is just the people who are going to accept the silliness and the falderall, and at least when, like I said, with Mosh Pit, they're getting behind him. When something remotely happens on the show that they're at, they'll get behind it because at least it's better than watching the video packages. But how can either of these guys be taken seriously as wrestling talent? I use that term in quotation marks. The bad jokes, the bad material, the goofy outfit. Mosh Pit's a heck of a looking athlete, but the way they've had him act. So anyway, they got in a fight, and there was no room to do it in the ring with all the furniture of the set of Happy Talk, with the chairs and the trinkets and the accents, and there's the Davenport and the Schiffer robe, and so they get out on the floor and fight a little bit where they've got some room, and Mosh Pit bounces Happy's head off the desk about 25 times, and then they get back in the ring, and Happy gets clotheslined to the floor, and there we go. There we go.
There we go.
Well, then the next person that walked through the door when Sami Zayn shot his mouth off was Drew McIntyre, and Drew McIntyre beat him up, and then he ran off through the crowd and got counted out. What about Lacey Evans? Remember the Southern Belle with the parasol and the bitchy attitude? Well, she was a phony all along.
You know why she's back, right?
I have no earthly clue.
Do you remember what happened, why she left?
I do. I have no earthly clue.
They were going to do the angle with her and Flair, remember?
And Charlotte was unhappy about that, but Flair was siding with Lacey.
And then she got pregnant. That's why she's back. Ric Flair, child support.
Oh, come on. Quit. I thought you were going somewhere with that.
That should be the angle, because everyone will believe it. I'm back now because I ended up having a child with Ric Flair and I can't get any money out of it.
Stop it. No. Again, is it the same person? Lacey Evans was the Southern Belle. She was bitchy. She was heelish. She would walk out to an entrance and then turn around and leave just so people could see what a glorious flower of Southern femininity that she was. And now, apropos of nothing, but she's been gone for a year because she got pregnant and had a baby. Or did she really in real life have get pregnant?
I
now?
believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
But now she just shows up and they've stood her up against a background and told her to tell her sympathetic life story. Okay, go.
With music and crowd noise behind it.
Yes. I'm not knocking her story. I'm knocking the presentation of same. Why did they do that? Besides the fact that they overlooked that story beforehand to go with Lacey Evans and her parasol twirling around and making entrances for no reason. Okay, that's one decision they could possibly rethink at a later date. But now if they're going to do it, why not work her back into this with an update on former WWE superstar Lacey Evans, or better yet, maybe don't even remind people that she was here doing all this shit before. Here, Lacey Evans, what an incredible story. She's training to come back after having a baby, but her life has been full of challenges. And do a package. Have somebody narrate it. The only thing worse than having, in some cases, a talent come out and tell how great they are if you're trying to make them a baby face, when they have to tell how great they are rather than somebody else talking great about them, the only thing worse than that is when they are put in the position of having to tell their own sad story that you're supposed to feel sorry for them about, instead of them commenting on the story that someone else is telling. Do you see the difference, Brian?
I do.
If you're watching a documentary on somebody that's had a hard life or tragic circumstances or whatever, if there's someone relating this story and then you get comments from that person, you don't get the feeling that that person is on purpose trying to play on your sympathies by telling this tale of sorrow and woe. When they just stand a talent that is not obviously the greatest public speaker in the world, she may have been sincere, but that would be a hard story to tell under any circumstances. And now they're just saying, here, stand up here like you're in a police lineup and tell it. That's ridiculous. And it contradicts everything that we've known about this person so far on this television program. And we got it sprung at us in 1 2-minute segment. A deprived childhood, addictive father, sad stories all around, but she was in the Marines and she's a mother and it's almost at some point she partnered with Wally Amos in the famous Amos Cookies empire. It was everything, right? In 2 minutes. They could have taken 3 or 4 weeks to do a 1-minute little piece on her each week as she trains to get back in the ring, and it would have been more natural. And also, I mean, do you see what this came off see-through, like somebody has told her to tell this story as a marketing strategy, did it not?
She seemed very sincere. Like you said, the way it was done was weird. Having music in the background, having the crowd noise, the background. They said the story will continue next week. So obviously this will be.
What more can there be? And then she was kidnapped and taken away to live with the monks in Tibet.
Well, she didn't go into her military career yet.
Well, boy, I hope that they give her a better location to do it than standing there like she's being interrogated in a military tribunal.
And if this is an option, put Ronda in front of a background and work with her in the back.
You know, do you remember Chilly Willy?
I do remember Chilly Willy, yeah.
What was his real name? It was Will something.
I could find out, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Well, the point is, he start in ECW and then they signed him briefly to developmental, or did he go to ECW after he was briefly in OVW? Which came first, chicken or the egg?
I thought he was in ECW first, but let me look it up here.
I think he was.
William Jones is Chilly Willy, and he was actually one of the guys in Matt and Jeff Hardy's Omega promotion, and then he went to ECW. And then from there, he went to OVW in 2004.
Well, the reason I bring him up is because he was, and I forget the exact details and particulars, and you can probably find it on Wikipedia or whatever, but he was a legitimate war hero. And he had been not only wounded, but there was other people were killed. It was a big, situation, right? And when they signed him to developmental, they sent him to OVW, and they wanted to use him obviously as a baby face, and they wanted to acknowledge and tell the story of his military service, and then how he wanted to get into wrestling, and here he is now. And I mean, that would make him a big baby face because of the circumstances behind his story. And he could tell it to you. I sat with him in the office, me and him and Danny Davis one day, and he told us this story, and it was incredible. And if you were in a 2 or 3 person group, or, the camera wasn't on, or whatever the case, he could tell you this story, but he couldn't tell it on television. And we tried, and I interviewed him. One of my talents, I don't think anybody has disputed, was being able to, with younger, greener guys, do a little fill when they got stuck, or maybe say a word that would prompt them or keep them on track or whatever, just from the amount of interviews I've done. And I knew his story. It didn't work. He would just stop, or he couldn't. And I mean, I know this obviously is a hard thing to talk about, but since this was the as Jim Ross would say, the thing to hang your hat on about Chilly Willy, and the reason why that they had signed him and put him together, we're going to give him this gimmick, and he couldn't tell the story. It was awkward, obviously, because it was awkward for him, because he wasn't a person that, if he hadn't gone to the military or got into wrestling, he wasn't going to go into a job with public speaking. That had not been a thing. So it's sometimes hard. These are true stories and real stories, and they would get this person over, but it's often better when somebody else tells it. It's the point I'm making.
We'll see what happens. As I said before, she's better telling her story than Ronda is at telling hers.
Well, but see, that's not Ronda's real story, really. Right? Ronda's trying to mix in a few things that her mother taught her or whatever. Probably, I'm sure she's mentioned them to the writers or whatever, but she's trying to do the writer's shit, and they're trying to put a mother's advice in as part of the gimmick. This is a real story. When you have to get on TV and say, well, my father was an alcoholic, and I was broke and penniless, and then something else happened, whatever the fucking case, right?
Yeah, really. You can't use that in a feud with Charlotte Flair.
Well, now, I'm not saying that this would be about Ronda Rousey. I'm saying when you have to tell one of these stories, like that Lacey Evans was telling, my father's an alcoholic, or at Jewel. I just saw a thing on the internet.
Oh, I just saw that.
Canadian Jewel. Yeah, that she, I wasn't homeless, penniless, sleeping in my car. I was sleeping in my car because I wouldn't fuck the record company executive. Well, but still, when you're saying you had to sleep in your car, you had your alcoholic father, or you were broke and penniless and having to beg on the streets for food like an animal or whatever, if that's a true, or you were blown up in combat, that's not an easy story to tell on national television. So, sometimes it's better to present these true stories in a different way to cast the person that you're talking about in the light that you want them cast in. And then Sasha Banks wrestled Liv Morgan.
Even I only had so much time.
Yeah, and then here came, I don't know what. Like I said, thank God Walter was on this program, but at least it was less wrestling than we had to watch the last few weeks. But here comes Reigns and Heyman and the Usos, and this is always good. And this was good to a point. A great Roman Reigns promo. Did Paul say a word this week? I guess he's resting.
He's been talking less and less since he's been back with Roman Reigns.
Well, that's good. Reigns is A, good at it, and B, I'm sure that Paul probably, his cardio is not what it once was, so he's got to rest for a few weeks every time he does a promo. Great Roman Reigns promo. He's got 2 titles. Now he wants the Usos to have 2. He wants them to unify the tag team title and wants them to bring him the Raw tag team titles as well. And then suddenly, here comes Shaky Nakamura. The music, and he does his whole entrance and gets up in the ring, and Reigns is looking there bemused. And they go face to face, and old Shaky starts to say something, and Reigns just clamps his hand on the microphone and stops him and says, "Hey, I know you need help. I'm gonna be what did he say, a benevolent tribal chief," or however he phrased her. I mean, he's so condescending, it's great, but he offered him to help Shaky with what he wanted, and he gives him a big hug, and then the Usos double super kick Shaky. And down he goes, and they play the music, and we're off the air. What was that about?
Well, I assume they're setting up Nakamura versus Roman Reigns for maybe Backlash.
Seriously?
Why else would you do this and leave it hanging like that?
That's why I would think that Vince McMahon, if somebody pitched the idea of Roman Reigns versus Shaky Nakamura on pay-per-view, I would think that he would call somewhere the local state authorities and have that person committed rather than do an angle for it.
Well, there's also another problem. There aren't that many guys to program with Roman Reigns right now. It's not the time for Cody. He just did something with Seth Rollins. I don't know when Brock's coming back. It may be for a rematch soon, or it may not be. We really don't know. Drew McIntyre is completely cooled off. Big E's out of action, maybe for good. We don't know. Who is there to really program Roman Reigns with right now?
You know what then I would advise to Vince McMahon? Fire the writers. That's why you're in this situation. There's all kinds of wrestlers out there. They haven't written for them and allowed them to go away. Or who's in charge of your talent relations? They've fired a bunch of wrestlers that are over on the other channel. Every once in a while, you see them. They do well when they're visible. Whose fault is that? And whose fault is your fucking, well, I know whose fault he thinks his developmental is. But the real fault of the developmental is whoever's been running it for the last 6 months that didn't, instead of changing it, I will agree, there were too many smaller guys that were never going to make the main roster. But NXT was a good wrestling program, or a better wrestling program than the other ones. And at least was, in some cases, a place where if a person had natural ability and the ability to listen and learn and understand things and not just be a mark or a spot monkey, you could advance your game there. But now it's turned into a fucking psychedelic protoplasm of greenness and bad 90s gimmicks. Come to think of it, I think you ought to fire everybody. The writers, the producers, the creators, the talent relations people. Well, not the producers. It's probably not their fault. Just the writers, the talent relations people.
Well, if you're going to clean house, you got to clean house.
Well, in that case, why don't, you know what they ought to do? They ought to just trade. Vince ought to just call Tony Khan and say, Tony, let's just trade companies. I'll give you mine, you give me yours.
You know, there should be talent trades when you have a contract, when you have a guy and you have a couple of years to go into contract and you just either don't want to use him, you're not going to use him, or you just don't think there's anything there. It's too bad there isn't a relationship where you can go, hey, Tony, do you have anyone with the same length of contract left? Let's trade contracts.
Yeah. Oh my God. You know, in OVW and developmental, I couldn't get them. I couldn't twist their arm and talk them into calling up people that I thought were ready. But God damn it, there were people a number of times that I couldn't get rid of to save my life when I would like, please, if you can't take them, then fire them. But I don't have anything else for them. They've been here forever. Anyway, that was SmackDown. But I'll tell you this, Brian, you know, I've been reading up on some things. I've been reading up on some things, and I've found some things that I didn't know. They've been studying these things. And of course, the more you study things, the more things you find out. And if I'd have known this years ago, I could have modified accordingly. Do you realize that headaches, teeth grinding, even digestive issues we've talked about can be caused by stress, Brian? Did you know that?
Makes sense.
And sleeping too little or sleeping too much or undereating or overeating, those things can be caused by stress. Did you know that?
Well, that too makes sense.
Did you know that even doom scrolling that the kids call it, that's where they scroll on their phone just endlessly, that can be caused by stress?
I didn't know that. I didn't know anything about doom scrolling. I thought that's what you called it when Ron Simmons played on his phone.
Well, no, it is even worse because it's caused by stress. And folks, if you're stressed in your life, I've dropped out of society, completely avoid human interaction, because the real cause of stress, Brian, is human beings. They're a deadly organism. They can kill you. I got one particular one that's stressing me right now. I won't tell you what his name is, but you're intimately acquainted with him.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, but anyway, if stress is getting you down and you don't have the option that I had of removing yourself from the human race, folks, maybe it's time to take care of yourself. In a world that's telling you to do more, sleep less, and grind all the time. I used to grind my teeth when I was a kid because I was very high-strung even then. Mama Cornette would remark about it all the time. Here's you a reminder, folks, to take care of yourself, do less, and maybe try some therapy with our friends at BetterHelp. Because BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, even live chat sessions. You don't have to see anybody on camera if you don't want to. You can be on the phone. You can chat like the kids do. You can write them letters if you want to. It's more affordable than in-person therapy. No waiting rooms, no trips back and forth across town, and all kinds of iffy weather. Give it a try, folks, and see if online therapy can help lower your stress. Of course, I still recommend completely dropping out of the human race. But if you can't do that, try BetterHelp. Of course, they sponsor this podcast, and our listeners get 10% off their first month services at BetterHelp.com/JCE. That is BetterHelp.com/JCE. Do one or the other. Completely resign from society or get a hold of BetterHelp.com today.
You know, Jim, I thought about the WCW booking committee when you were going through the list of stressors. And I have a question for you, and you can't say I don't care. I really want an answer.
Okay.
Obviously, if we're talking about the committee with you, Kevin Sullivan, and Ric Flair, it was a very stressful time. You were stressed out.
Yes.
Flair was stressed out.
Yes.
I don't know if Kevin feels stress. I'm not sure what Kevin maybe was.
He does. He internalizes it sometimes and tries to be philosophical, but then sooner or later it will boil up a bit.
So you three are feeling very similar, and it's the environment and it's the circumstances. Do you think Jim Herd himself was stressed out?
Oh God, I hope so. I hope so. Shame of it all, it didn't set in a fatal way. He's still alive and kicking. What is he now, 83 years old? Looks like he's got that Catwoman's face. He's had so much plastic surgery work done. The woman that wanted to make herself look like a cat.
Yeah.
Remember they showed pictures of him online a year or so ago for some reason, unfortunately not an obituary. And nobody recognized him that knew him then. It's not like a guy that was 50-something then is 80-something now and aged, but it looked like somebody rebuilt his face. Maybe, did he have a weightlifting accident like Bullet Bob did and the barbell rolled across his fucking pie hole? I don't know.
DiBiase did it.
Hopefully, somebody should have done it. But no, I sincerely hope he had to be. Thinking about it, he had to be. Because he's the one who knew, one would think more than anybody, that he didn't know what he was doing, which is why he had to bluster around and do all kinds of crazy things to act like he knew what he was doing. But he knew he didn't. He was still working for TBS, even though they didn't care at that point and allowed him to be there for 3 years until he resigned. I'm sure they were fed up. So I'm sure he was stressed all the time, but he deserved to be. It didn't have to be that hard. He was the one making it hard for everybody.
When were you guys made aware, if not at the very beginning, of the nature of his relationship with Jack Petrick and their wives?
Pretty much right when we heard his name. Because, I mean, if maybe a few days later, there was no internet then. There was
wasn't like
instant
months
communication.
later.
No, it wasn't months later. No, because the first thing, when it was announced to the talent, okay, the new executive vice president or whatever his specific title was of World Championship Wrestling is going to be, wait a minute, drum roll, please. Jim Herd, we all said, who? From where? What? Everybody asked, and immediately nobody had ever heard of this guy. How's he going to be running a wrestling company? What the fuck? And then the people that knew the story and the relationship and his background couldn't wait to see the looks on people's faces when they told it, so it spread quickly. And we found out that he was an executive from Pizza Hut in the St. Louis market that had 20 years previously been a station director for KPLR and had directed the wrestling show back in those days when they smartened very few people up. And the only wrestling he'd ever seen, worked on, or had a frame of reference on was Sam Muchnick's St. Louis studio show. And he didn't learn much from that. And how did this come to be? Oh, his wife is friends with Jack Petrick's wife. And apparently, somehow, Jack Petrick's wife heard mention that they just bought a wrestling company. Oh, well, Doris's husband, or whatever her fucking name, why, he used to do the wrestling. And now, there you go. I mean, you couldn't make it up. And then when we found out that it was true, it was even worse. But I mean, that information was out fairly quickly because everybody was gobsmacked.
Well, speaking of gobsmacked, let's talk a little bit about AEW Rampage. I know you didn't get to see too much of it. How much of it did you get to see? There was one match everyone was talking about.
Well,
and a promo that was in the news as well.
Don't tell me, I know you didn't get to see much of it, or how much did you get to? You know exactly what I saw. I read the recap like I do every Friday, and I said, I ain't watching this shit. And I didn't. And then you called me and said, if I wasn't as bad enough of a mood about the cardboard, you called me and said, everybody's talking about Yuta and Moxley. I said, Yuta and Moxley. Oh, you got to watch Yuta and Moxley. So I watched Yuta and Moxley. And then I was in an even worse mood afterwards. Why do you do these things to me?
Some thought you might like it.
Some would be crazy. Some would be. What would I have liked about that? It was Moxley's masturbatory, strong style Japanese wrestling fantasies on full display with a. What was the thing that anybody liked about this? Just the fact that the guy bled and wouldn't quit?
Well, I think the thought is that it elevated Wheeler Yuta, especially with the crowd reaction to him.
Oh, you think?
And the fact that it was a bloody I'll give them credit. Moxley's been promising a river of blood. He finally delivered it once.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. It may be perfect timing with the new Warner Media merger. We can talk about that in a second. But no, of course it elevated. He dropped the elevator on him, still couldn't beat him. Of course it elevated Wheeler Yuta. Because can you imagine if Adam Cole had ever had anybody do for him when he came in the company what Wheeler Yuta just was allowed to do because Tony now likes him or his ugly tights and said, well, let's push him to the moon. Or anybody, Jay Lethal. anybody marketable that you could have done that. It would be like Hulk Hogan had decided with Barry Horowitz, hey, Barry, you want to kick out of 3 leg drops? I'm going to clothesline you. You get up and Hulk up. The people will fucking pop like crazy. Because let me ask you a question, Brian Last. As one of the bigger 80s, 90s WWF fans / experts, if Hulk Hogan had a match with Barry Horowitz, where he gave Horowitz his vertical suplex and Horowitz jumped up and looked at him, shook his finger at Hulk, and then Hulk shot him off for the big boot, and he took it and the big leg drop, and then he kicked out at 2. And then Hulk said, what the fuck, and got up on a second turnbuckle and dropped the leg off of that, and then he kicked out at 2. And then he gave him the axe bomber that he knocked Antonio Inoki out with in Japan, and he kicked out at 2. But now he's bleeding. And then finally, if Hulk Hogan had ever had a submission move, he put that on fucking Barry Horowitz, and Barry Horowitz fucking broke out of that, and then Hogan put him away with a leg drop off the top rope. But then fucking Barry Horowitz was back up on his feet to shake hands with Hogan's fucking cohorts afterwards. Do you think the people would have popped on all those things also?
To an extent, but actually I don't think so, because I think in the 80s there would have been more confusion that it was happening than popping.
Well, that's because people were smarter back then.
But I also don't think it's fair to compare Barry Horowitz to Wheeler Yuta, because Wheeler Yuta hasn't been used like Barry Horowitz was.
No, he hasn't. Barry Horowitz actually got a couple of wins on TV every now and then. I'm sorry, but besides the fact, at the same time as you've got another one of these Japanese legends, 50 years old, getting German suplexed onto his head in the turnbuckles and being carried out unable to move his extremities, and you've got a new programming person, and I know you've got some background on this young lady, a new programming person that's about to be in charge of Warner Media and all their various networks. And you were taken, I'm not saying that Wheeler Yuta is a horrible human being, and he might even be an okay wrestler. He is an unimpressive physically, smaller, skinny guy with, does he have personality? Well, I haven't seen much. And this is the guy you decide that you're going to allow him to spurt blood everywhere on national TV, kick out of a fucking former world champion's every finish. Of course the people are going batshit for something like that. The question is, number one, the precedent you're setting with people kicking out of all this shit at a time when the injury rate's never been higher. And it takes all this shit to beat a guy. Like, if it takes that much to beat that guy, what are you going to have to do to Powerhouse Hobbs? Then you combine the lack of any type of psychology or selling or logic or sense that is infested these guys, because they all fantasize, as I said, late at night, whether on Wednesdays or any other night, when they're fondling themselves, thinking about Japan. The matches in Japan all look like that, and they all fucking suck now for the same reason. Because Japan lost their mind years ago like we lost ours. And then, on top of that, you let the guy spray blood all over everywhere when a new programmer is more of the HGTV Food Network sensibility and less of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre sensibility. And I don't know what the fuck everybody's looking at. There was blood in Briscoes and FTR. It was in the middle of a great wrestling match. There was blood in CM Punk and MJF, because that was on pay-per-view, and it was a great wrestling match with big stars. This is not the way you elevate a young athlete by allowing him, obviously, to be competitive with a person above him, but you don't make the goddamn freak show spectacle with the goddamn blood and the spurting and the ripping and biting. You don't, while the announcers are saying the words blood and bloodbath, and at the same time completely kill every finish and bump in the wrestling business just to get one middle card talent over. And I'll tell you what, I will be more than happy I'll do a video. If Wheeler Yuta ever becomes the world champion of any fucking thing, I'll do a video publicly apologizing. But right now, of a lot of young, in shape, accomplished workers in that company that could have benefited from a massive push like that, they did it for Wheeler Yuta.
I have seen it pointed out. We've talked about the four pillars, as they're famously known now. MJF, Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara, I guess, was it Adam Page? Is he the fourth one? Is he the fourth one? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I have no idea.
There are people who think that the next round of people that Tony's looking to really get behind include Wheeler Yuta and Daniel Garcia. That these are the guys that are the next project for the company.
Well, they've got a project ahead of them. You can't find a personality machine at the gym. You're going to find that out. But this match, it was every Moxley trope. I hate that word, so I'm going to use it because it irritates people. Every Moxley trope, every Moxley cliche, because he's patterned his shit after modern Japanese strong style shit. Even before the match even starts, a dive, a jump start, they got to fight into the arena. For what reason? So they can do that Japanese fight walk back into the ring. It's like, okay, this is our spot where we go out in the crowd, we do this, and then we walk pretending to fight at the same time. Like bless them. But when Brody and Abdullah used to grab each other by the head and just walk through the crowd like that, we got to go over here now.
I actually like the jump open, though, of Wheeler Yuta being the first guy to get Moxley as he's walking through the arena and he's not even in the ring yet.
Well, in that case, he should have been dressed as the fucking hot dog guy in Section C, and he should have bombarded him with the ketchup when he walked by. But anyway, I'm sorry. Curb stomp into the steel stairs just to get the color. Yuta sold well, but Moxley was not going for okay. It's Moxley's gimmick to chew on people and bite people and want to break limbs and arms and legs and whatever. It's not even a Steve Austin where he's an anti-hero and he's doing things to people that have done wrong to him. It's just this freak show garbage death match. Oh, he loves blood. He's not going for revenge. The guy he's in the ring with is clearly overmatched, but the people, the AEW fans, remember, there's a set amount of them, and we see them every week. They're cheering an uber heelish massacre from this supposed babyface on this fucking guy that doesn't deserve it. And somebody's, well, the story is he must bleed to get in the Blackpool combat. Oh, for fuck's sake. Unless it's a goddamn no disqualification grudge match where there's fucking personal animosity between two people. Why are they fucking ripping and clawing and biting and bleeding and the people are cheering this poor kid? Their logic and their psychology is so ass backwards. That's why they can't grow this audience. Everybody else be like, what the fuck is going on here? And then suddenly, because it's phony too, that's another thing. When the Briscoes and FTR fight, or even with MJF and CM Punk, or a lot of shit from the territory days, you're looking at a fight and the blood is incidental because you're lost in the idea of this thing. But suddenly, Yuta gets mauled for however long, half the match, and then suddenly shit cans Moxley, jumps up to the top rope, does a crossbody over the ring post to the floor on Moxley through a table, which gets holy shit and fight forever chants from these people. And then Moxley's the one that took the move, got cross-bodied through a table by a 200-pound man coming from 12 feet in the air, and he gets back in the ring first. And Yuta, who's spurting blood everywhere, can't hardly beat the 10 count, but once he rolls back in the ring for the 10 count, or to beat the 10 count, immediately gets up to his feet, runs and backslides Moxley for a 2 count. Then he hits a German suplex. Then he hits a Samoan drop. Then he does Bryan Danielson's stomp. Then he does a splash off the top rope. And yes, all these things are getting pops, and all these things would, of course, get pops when you, from people, anybody that was ever allowed to do this, it would have gotten a pop, but they were never allowed to do it because it's fucking stupid. This is shit you learn your first month in wrestling school. And then he gets the STF on Moxley. And Moxley hits him with a clothesline and gets a 2 count. And then he crawls over and spends a while telling him what to do, because the director cuts away to a crowd shot and the announcers say, look at Moxley trash talking him. And then Moxley's biting the blood and then hits his paradigm shift, gets a 2 count. I wrote, they've never pushed Page like this. He's their world champion. Then he gets a choke and Yuta breaks it. Then he elbows him to death. And Yuta's still fighting. And then the brainbuster paradigm shift, 2 count. Yeah, it's like a video game. It's phony in front of your eyes. Of course, people are going, well, look at that. Because you never see that. There's a reason for it. What do they have to do to anybody now that's much bigger and more impressive with a better upside, either more experience or better athletic ability or potential future than Wheeler Yuta? And since this was not in the context of an actual fight that you could get lost in and believe was a contest, but rather an exhibition of phony wrestling shit, you were told that because of the people who taken these huge ass kickings and then immediately jumping up and going 100 miles an hour. And the fact that everybody's smart and knows that he's just bleeding to get over. It's a freak show at this point. There's no wrestling continuity, no logic, and no psychology. So then you're just watching the fake fight. Well, for the fans that like AEW, that's probably what they like is fake fights, because that's what most of their matches look like. Well, then you're doing a fake fight with a middle card guy that's never going to draw you 15 cents in Chinese money, and you're risking serious injury to one of your main event guys, and potential cancellation from the new programming woman that's probably not wanting to be in charge of the guy biting the head off a live chicken at the county fair. Your thoughts, Brian?
I liked it. I thought it was one of the better Moxley matches. He had a good one with Jay Lethal a few weeks ago. I thought this was good. I don't disagree with all of your...
If he'd have done this for Jay Lethal, how over do you think Jay Lethal would be?
I don't disagree with the things you said. And in fact, you kind of convinced me of a lot of these things as you're talking about them. But I like the story and I can get into it. And I can get into it enough that I could overlook some of the ridiculous shit like kicking out of everything. Everyone kicks at everything. When I was young, a finisher was literally the finish of the match. And then that was it. And you accepted it. Now they don't accept it. You have to kick out of things first.
Have you seen Mike Mondo's tweets, by the way? At the Mike Mondo on Twitter.
I have not, no.
Mondo, over the last couple of days, I've retweeted about 15 or 20 of them, so apparently you're not paying attention to me either. He's been tweeting in 240 characters or less, common sense rules of thumb of things that you learn in wrestling school, in basic training, that nobody applies anymore or very seldom do. And I've tweeted that if anybody either wants to be a wrestler or thinks they already are, they ought to be following Mondo, because he gave out more knowledge in 10 or 12 tweets than you get watching every wrestling program on television for the course of a week. And Yes, there's elements of things in here. I'm not against all blood. I'm against blood when it's just foolish. I'm not against this angle. I'm against the talent that's being used in the angle. Because I'm sorry. Bless them. They want to elevate the young man. Look at him. Sorry. Maybe later, not now. There's elements of everything in this, but not as it's all put together at this particular point in time. I don't think they did themselves any favors. Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Well, did you see the post-match?
Well, Regal and Danielson come out and shake his hand and wish him well. That's pretty much it, right? Did anybody get beat up? I missed that.
No,
part.
that was the end. There was a respectful ending of the program at 11 p.m. on a Friday.
And there's William Regal, who's probably 60 or 70 pounds heavier than this guy and 3 or 4 inches taller. He's shaking it.
I will tell you this. If you watched it with commentary, next time you hear him on commentary, think this. Even though he's representing Moxley, and he's, I guess, slightly heelish, I think if they just had William Regal as a one-man commentary team talking over these matches, it would be the best show in wrestling. Because if you listen to what he says, it's fascinating, it's smart, it's observant. I would love for Tony, if you're listening, if you just happen to be listening, one show, give William Regal a shot as a single-man commentator calling the action. I've been watching way too much Chicago from the 50s.
Well, I'll tell you what, it beats wherever from the 2020s, and there's too many voices talking at it. That's why we tune a lot of them out, because there's too many different people trying to jump in, interact, say their various things. But anyway, I hate that everybody happened to like this, and I don't, but I don't for the reasons that I just mentioned. And doing shit like this, not only is you got to pick the right time, the right place, and the right individuals. And, and again, I'm not trying to knock, when they bring the kid in and just make him a flunky, and he is a flunky interacting with flunky partners and getting beat by other people, then you can't just turn, especially when there's no raging visual or physical attribute that he has, or wild personality that's screaming, push me, do this. He's a good athlete, so bring him along slowly and let him percolate. You can't just have Moxley go out there and do this for everybody on the card, or then it becomes meaningless. And again, I will apologize publicly if Wheeler Yuta becomes the world champion of anything ever, much less in the next year or two. But I think I'm safe.
Well, I know you didn't watch anything else from Rampage. Did you hear about the fans apparently turning on, as we said was going to happen, Sammy and Ty Conti?
Well, I've heard that they're starting to get a little blowback for they're too cute for school, and they're just darling kids. And those fans don't like these fans remind me, the AEW fans kind of a lot of times remind me of the grunge fans of the ECW fans of the 90s, where they all looked like Kurt Cobain, and it was an accomplishment in life to be the most miserable, unhappy person. And now Sammy and Ty I've told you from the start, we watched Sammy. He has that slappable face. And he was such a great, smarmy, obnoxious little smart-ass heel. But he gets to be a baby face because of some of the things they did with him in the booking, but generally because he was doing all the daredevil shit. And now he becomes a full-fledged babyface, tries to do more daredevil shit, but now he's got a pretty girl. And you can tell the one thing these AEW regulars don't have is a pretty girlfriend. And now they're starting to get pissed at him. And they're a little too cute. And we need to take them down a peg. That's the way it goes. And then there's the rumbling, and then there you go. He should have stuck with the homely girl. That's why they like that, because he's one of them. Okay, well, that's the best Sammy can do. Well, there's kind of hope for me.
It's one of the first times I've noticed this. I'm sure they've done it in the past, but not to this degree. where Rampage being a tape show, they really played with the audio on this segment. So you really couldn't even hear the booing that people who were there told me was over the top. They really did not want Sammy and Ty out there. And the other problem is Lambert. We've been talking go away heat lately. I think Lambert has go away heat with the AEW audience. So now you have Lambert with Scorpio Sky. And since the advent of the TNT title, has it meant less than it does right now? I don't think so. And Ethan Page, who you see as being the albatross and I see as being held back by Scorpio Sky and Dan Lambert.
Okay, I will even now mark this date down in your little black book wherever you keep it.
A lot of dates I got to mark down today.
Well, you're going to want to keep track of this one because I will go with if Moxley had done anything like this for Ethan Page, he'd be a star. He's got the size, the athletic look, the fucking some personality, some blah blah on the promo. I just think he's a slime ball asshole because he's none of these fake cosplay trampoline invisible man fucking wrestlers. But nevertheless, I couldn't, if that match had been between Moxley and the other Page, I couldn't say, well, they picked a guy with no personality and no physical attributes and no look. So I'll give you that one. Mark that down.
But going back to Sammy and Ty, that's the problem. You have Sammy and Ty who are now becoming incredibly unlikable in just a matter of weeks. And you have Dan Lambert, who people really don't want to hear. Other than Tony Khan, I don't think any fans really want Dan Lambert out there doing his male Vicky Guerrero act. And then Scorpio Sky means nothing to the fans. And Ethan Page, because of his involvement, means nothing to the fans, and previous things he's done means nothing to you. This whole thing was horrible, and the fans were just apparently there live booing the shit out of it all.
Well, at least sooner or later, even a blind squirrel will find a nut, and sooner or later, even the AEW faithful have had enough.
Should they turn Sammy and Ty heel right away?
Well, actually, I think that would be fantastic because besides the fact that they might save old Sammy's life because he's apparently a complete idiot, and he's taken to heart when he gets the close-up camera on him and he goes, "I'm crazy," and spins his finger around his head, and then he tries to kill himself on live television, which, by the way, imagine what that will do for their renewal fucking negotiations. A death on live TV. It'll either kill him or get him twice as much money, one or the other. But the next step is to turn them heel because now, once again, Sammy proved when he was a heel that he's a good heel. He's got the slappable face. He can be a smart ass. He can do good shit in the ring. If somebody needs to keep control of him and not let him do some of the things he wants to do. But yeah, and with the pretty girl with him, that's exactly what gets heat. That was the whole deal when I knew Mero was screwed in the WWF to begin with, when Sable talked her way into it. They might have gone with him, but not with the fucking pretty big fake-titted girl in the corner with him. He's a babyface. I asked Bruce Pritchard, I said, he's a babyface. What's he need the girl for? Well, she's part of his presentation. What's she there for? I said, she can't interfere in the matches because he's a babyface. I said, if she does get fucked with, since she's not a wrestler, then she's just a liability. So why is she out there? And lastly, since more people are going to be looking at her than looking at him, it's going to hinder him from getting over because they're all going to be staring at her plastic surgery. Lo and behold, all those things came true. In this case, Sammy's a little bit more established as a talent in his own right. It's not like Ty Conti's going to get all the attention. They are a heat-getting couple because all of the fat AEW fans at ringside could say, well, he's fucking her and I'm not, so I'm pissed at him. That's not hard to figure out. I don't see how you keep a guy with a girl in his corner babyface. He doesn't need her because he's not going to have her interfere. Then she becomes a liability that he should have known better than to leave out there where the heel could attack her. So he deserves any bad things that come to him from that. And the only thing that you're going to get is heat on your guy because he's got a prettier girlfriend than all the fans do. So I'm not a favor of girls with baby faces.
Well, perhaps if some of those ringside fans want to be in the shape that Sammy's in and get the kind of girl that Sammy could get, they should start their day with a good breakfast.
Well, that's true, because that's one thing that we can say is that both of those kids apparently eat very healthy. I think they eat very, very healthy because they look like they do. And folks, I know sometimes it's just Mother Nature. Sometimes you look good, and sometimes you look like 30 miles of bad country road. But that's no excuse to feel bad as well, even if you look like death warmed over. If you look like teetotal shit, you can still feel good, and that counts for something. And folks, feeling good starts with a healthy breakfast and a good diet, and you can get both of those with our friends at Magic Spoon. Folks, Magic Spoon, whether you want to look at the 0 grams of sugar, the 13 to 14 grams of protein, or the only 4 net grams of carbs in each serving, Magic Spoon tastes great but is not full with the sugar and junk that you remember from when you were a kid. There's only 140 calories in each serving, so technically you can eat 11 and a half bowls of this every day and still be on a 1,500 calorie diet. It's keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and low carb. You can eat it with a spoon and a bowl of milk. You can munch it like trail mix. You can grind it up and snort it like Ozzy Osbourne did with the line of ants. You could, whatever the case.
We don't recommend any of those things. Just eat it the way you would eat normal cereal.
Well, that's the best way to do it. And also, don't snort the honey nut, because those nuts will get stuck in your capillaries. You can build your own box, folks. Available flavors include cocoa, fruity, frosted, peanut butter, cookies and cream, maple waffle, blueberry, cinnamon, and the newly reformulated honey nut. I've always liked putting nuts in my honey, but now you can change that formulation and you can emit all kinds of flavor that is now in Magic Spoon's permanent collection thanks to the great feedback they got on Honey Nut. Go to magicspoon.com/Jim, J-I-M, that is, right now and grab that custom bundle. Use the promo code Jim at checkout to save $5 off your order. And we know so many of you are, because we see the pictures tweeted all the time of people's pantry closets and kitchen shelves and various places in their garage and or bomb shelters stocked with Magic Spoon. Here's another thing. If you're afraid shit's going to go south and you're going to need to spend a lot of time underground, you're going to want to be healthy and you're going to want to shit good. You're not going to want to get diarrhea or any other forms of intestinal distress while you're in a bomb shelter or a bunker with anybody else or even yourself. So put about 17 or 18 custom bundles of Magic Spoon in your bomb shelter, bunker, shack in the middle of the woods, or other type retreat. And that way, when the whole world is dying of radiation burns, you'll be having a healthy and fruity breakfast. MagicSpoon.com/Jim. Use the code Jim to save you $5 off, and it'll save your life too. Eat this for a year. Boy, the fucking people will be surprised when they pry the lid off your bomb shelter. If you've been eating Magic Spoon for a year, you'll look great till they kill you. Magic Spoon.
They're not going to kill you.
No, Magic
Why would you
Spoon
say
won't
that?
kill you.
No, they won't.
The people that pry the lid off your bomb shelter when they find you, they're going to be marauding fucking bands of mercenaries that are going to be.
They may be the people to save you. What if they're going to save you?
Well, and they won't kill you. And they'll be amazed at how good you look because you've been eating the Magic Spoon.
All right, that's Magic Spoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, it certainly is.
Jim, let's get some questions here on this program. This first one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from DJ Ellis, Brisbane, Australia. Do you think Cody Rhodes will be the one to end Roman Reigns' title run just to stick it to AEW? Knowing the AEW diehards will absolutely lose their minds. And let me just say here at the start, I'm not sure if that's why Vince McMahon does what he does as a booker.
Yeah.
To drive the fans in AEW crazy. But
I'm going to say that yes, probably, and no, of course not, to those two things. No, he doesn't give a shit what the AEW fans do, except if they come and spend money with his company or watch his program or whatever. But we just talked about who's lined up for Roman Reigns. We also, the story is perfect. It has to come to fruition. And it can't be like Lawler in Memphis, where Jerry Jarrett was able to milk it for years and years and years. That Lawler's chase for the world title, that, sooner or later he'll get. Well, he milked it he created his own, but that had still been 5 years. And he actually got a recognized version of the title 13 years after his first title shot. They ain't going to be able to stretch this out that long. I'm thinking the perfect resolution to this story, and that would make Cody, and that appears to be what Vince McMahon's mission is for him to finally be the one to do it. How soon, I don't know, but I can't see how maybe they could salvage it if Cody wins it from someone else that won it from Roman Reigns. But Cody's going to have to end up with it sooner or later, or the whole thing's shit. And I would think that would be before his multi-year contract is up. You don't want to put your belt on a guy that's in the last year of his deal. You want to get it on him and get a run and see where that goes. So don't you think? It's not a question of whether he's going to win it unless something drastically changes and he or something else fucks up royally what they're planning to do. There's no way he can't win it because of this story.
I said 2 options the other day. I'm going to add a third one. I think I said SummerSlam or WrestleMania or the Garden, because then you really have an ending to the story.
What is there? And if one of those, do they have a pay-per-view in the next year?
Probably not. Probably not, because the Garden's so much smaller now in terms of how much seating there is than ever before, and it's so expensive to run there. It's a union building, and there's a lot of unions in that building. I don't know if they're going to be running any events. I mean, they just ran one there, and it looked cool, and they filmed some of it, but that was a house show.
Yeah. Well, there you go. But that's, if you're writing a story of the prodigal son coming to avenge and or do something in honor of his father, and he doesn't do it, well, he looks like a dipshit. Do you think Cody Rhodes made this move to look like a dipshit?
No, and it's a good story that WWE can get behind and really push hard, and they like that. They like, they get tired of it. Luger lost the bus and lost the title and didn't get the push, but they like that time where they can really get excited and tell the story.
Well, and the thing is, if it's and Vince loves great stories like that. He doesn't give a shit whatever happened in Japan, and he doesn't care of what, the most popular indie feud that the guy had in his entire career. He wants a story that everybody can understand, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't, and sometimes his own personal strangeness comes in. But in general, if it's a great long-term wrestling story, Vince McMahon's been behind it over the last 30 years or so. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, Cody Rhodes didn't make this move to look like an idiot. And that's what he'd look like if he doesn't win the title they took from his daddy in the garden.
If there's any kind of shenanigans in that first title match, a count out, a Luger, or whatever it may be, if there's not a finish, or he doesn't walk out with that belt in that first title match, does that tell you about Vince's commitment to him?
Well, it tells me one of two things. Either Vince is having second thoughts, or Vince didn't learn anything in 1993. And I have a feeling that he did. I have a feeling if Cody, I got to wait and see the finish. But if he loses his first chance at it without a really good finish to lead to a really good stipulation and a really good rematch, it wouldn't be good.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Andrew Machado, Pickering, Ontario, Canada. I was listening to a recent Renee Dupree interview where he tells a story about Jim calling him on the phone and not realizing it was a Canadian phone number, and Jim blowing a gasket when he received his phone bill. Does Jim remember this, and can he go into more detail about it?
Yes, I do. He's another one. They sent Renee Dupree down here when he was 18 years old. And yes, he was 6'3" or whatever and 250 pounds. But just because you put the brain of a child in the body of an adult. And he's from Canada and a small part of Canada also, Nova Scotia or New Brunswick or wherever the fuck. And that's, he was another one of the guys, instead of, they tried to rush him and they rushed him into La Resistance. He's 20 years old or whatever. He couldn't even legally rent cars. And he got heat on him with a lot of the guys in the locker room just because, again, it's one of those French-Canadian things. They have a habit of saying things in a kind of an inflammatory way. And then you got a teenager and he has no experience, even though his family's, his father was in the business. So, but anyway, the first time they sent him down here, he calls me once he gets into town, and I'm going to try to go over some things with him and explain to him what our schedule is, what would, just the general shit. You just got here, right? He calls me. I said, give me your number. Let me call you right back because I'm busy. So I called him 15 minutes later, whatever. And I talked to him for about an hour. And, prepped him on and tell him, hey, here's the place where a lot of the guys are staying, the Suburban Lodge, extended stay, and you can get this and do this, whatever, answered his questions, whatever the case may be. And this was back, because this was 20 years ago. This was back in the days when you still got a phone bill and they billed for long distance, right? It was Sprint. I had my Sprint at that time. He's got a goddamn cell phone from New Brunswick. And the hour phone call cost me $195. And I was like, what the fuck? Jesus H. Christ, what the fuck? Where is your phone from? That's what he's New Brunswick or whatever. I said, goddamn. I said, either get a local cell phone or I'm going to call you from now on at the fucking Suburban Lodge through the switchboard. But he has $195 for me to give him his orientation into OVW over the phone.
What was the biggest phone bill you ever had?
Oh, in Smoky Mountain or for a while in the WWF when I was doing a lot of either booking the third-party bookings or the extras for TV, $600-700 a month sometimes.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com with no name attached. There were talks about a storyline with Dominik and Rey Mysterio where they feuded and Dominik would go over, resulting in Rey retiring and passing the mask down to his son. Do you think that would fix the problem with Dominik Mysterio's image while also getting him over?
No. I'm not saying Dominik shouldn't wear a mask. That might, besides for the nondescript physique, a mask might make him look cooler, more luchadorish, and less, high school kid working at Circuit City. But no, it wouldn't get a guy over to be the one to beat his father and retire him, one of the all-time most beloved superstars, wrestlers of any era, Rey Mysterio. A heel would get over by being the guy to retire that guy, and then Dominik would get over by being the guy to carry on being given the mask by his father to carry on and get even, right? Have they changed psychology since last I looked?
Yeah, I don't know about Dominik feuding with Rey and then getting the mask and that making him a star. That doesn't sound like a good idea.
That would make him a goddamn pariah, wouldn't it?
You would think.
Yeah, well, they're calling right now to say, fuck you, don't do this shit. All right, nevertheless.
All right, so that was your answer on the Rey and Dominik.
That's my answer, yeah. Are you completely out of your ever-loving mind?
Here's our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Robert in Germany/Poland.
Oh.
I guess he's in both.
Okay.
I guess he goes back and forth. He commutes.
He's bi-coastal.
During the FTR Bucks match, a ringside photographer in strange gear was highly involved in the match, obviously not by taking pictures, but by communicating with the Bucks and spraying stuff onto Nick regularly. What might that have been? What was his actual mission there?
What?
And you got the phone ringing again. And did Jim have any other tasks as ringside photographer other than actual photos.
Well, wait a minute. Is he talking about that it was like that Cutlet that was spraying him when he thinks he's the photographer?
I'm guessing he doesn't watch a lot of AEW. Maybe he heard the review and watched a match, and he thought the Young Bucks were out there interacting with a ringside photographer.
No. What's the name of the question asker?
Robert from Germany/Poland.
Okay, Robert from Germany/Poland. No, it wasn't a ringside photographer. It's some idiot stooge school, not even high school, but grade school friend of the Hardley boys that they got a job because he likes to imitate wrestlers and play video games, and they put him in their corner as a stooge to wear a stupid face shield for some reason, spray him with cold spray, and shoot their video promos where they refer to him by name on interviews that are going on a national television show to make it look like their little home-based business YouTube program that a bunch of other people with too much time on their hands watch. So that's his name is Brandon Cutlet because he's a bland, nondescript piece of white meat.
As opposed to those ringside photographers.
Yes, those ringside photographers back in the day, they were badasses. They got all kinds of women, made all kinds of money, and they were built like Greek gods back in my day.
All right, well, let's move on from that. Jim, our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Big Andy in Louisville, Kentucky.
Oh, shit, I wish it was Big Andy Varga from New Jersey. He had the greatest old 50s wrestling collectibles.
I remember him at Dennis's shows when they would have the conventions before the shows, yeah.
I would spend my entire payoff for the weekend on Saturday morning before the doors opened to the public with Big Andy Varga.
When discussing the Logan Paul WrestleMania match, Jim made an off remark about how Tony Chimmel would have taken his Pokemon card and been off to the races. Was Tony known for helping things disappear?
No, I didn't mean to indicate that Chimmel was a light-fingered Louie. I meant to indicate that back when people had a goddamn half a bit of gumption, old Tony Chimmel would have been sitting there going, this fucking idiot has just brought $5 million down here around his neck and set it here. I'll see you later. I'm going to go to the fucking Hawaii and retire. But no, he would, unless it was $5 million, he wouldn't have stolen it.
All right, asked and answered. Let's go to our next question.
Yeah.
Jim, this one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Julio in Costa Rica.
Down by the schoolyard?
No, in Costa Rica, not by the schoolyard. That's in Queens.
Well, no, they have schools in Costa Rica.
In the song, they're talking about Corona, Queens.
Well, he could still be down by the schoolyard even if he's in Costa Rica.
Well, let's go to Julio's
It's not
question.
the same schoolyard.
Recently, I've been rewatching old TNA programs and found myself viewing 2007's America Most Wanted breakup. It all happened when James Storm broke a bottle of alcohol in Chris Harris's face, resulting in Harris being blinded in one of his eyes. The storyline then played out with you, Jim, refusing to put Harris in a match with Storm, since it would be unfair, since Harris can't properly see, and after much deliberation, Jim does put them in a match. A blindfold match at the pay-per-view. Before the bell even rang, the crowd was loudly chanting "Fire Russo," and what followed was a slow-paced and confusing match that killed the crowd. They only popped when the blindfold fell off, but then booed loudly when the referee put it back on. May I know, what was the reasoning in TNA management for booking this match the way it was booked? And what do you remember, if anything, about who put the match together? I understand you weren't in charge of everything in TNA, so I find it interesting to ask who was behind this idea in the first place. Side note, the match that followed this one between the two was a fantastic Texas death match that Harris ended up winning at Sacrifice 2007. Very entertaining match.
That match was one of the better TNA matches that anybody ever had during that period of time, much less just Harris and Storm. The Texas Death Match that they had second was a wrestling match, and they were great wrestlers, and they had complemented styles with each other very well, and they had a great match, one of the better matches in TNA history, which followed a complete abortion, which the questioner just asked about. And who do you think was behind that? Who was the person that had the Hood of Death match blindfold with Jake Roberts in the WWF in 1987?
Oh, no.
Was it
Rick Martel in 91?
Or 91, okay, not 87, 91. Rick Martel and Jake Roberts, WWF, the bad parts of WWF. That was people that in New York that lived there and aspired to own video stores and weren't getting laid. And that's the only thing they remembered was the idea itself. They didn't remember that those were also stinker matches, all the blindfold matches, because guys didn't know how to work them. Mostly stinker matches. I had a childhood fondness for the blindfold battle royal, but that was for spot shows. Nevertheless, I was being a good soldier making that match on television in my capacity as on-air authority figure, but I had nothing to do with it. Neither booking it nor setting it up. I can't remember who the agent was, but it didn't make any difference because once you've painted yourself into that predicament, I mean, all the agent can do is say, well, here's the 3 or 4 blindfold spots and the general kind of way you work it, but they didn't have the right blindfold, the right kind of blindfold. It fell off. It was typical of. And that's when they did chant Fire Russo. The only time I remember them chanting Fire Russo louder was during that last rights match with Sting and Abyss, where they were supposed to put one or the other on the platform and lift them to heaven, because Sting was religious and Russo was religious and Abyss just wanted a fucking pay-per-view match. So they had to bring God into it. And then that's also when they Abyss stabbed Sting in the face and almost put his eye out because they had plastic candelabras on the corners of their funeral home type setting. And they thought it'd be a good idea if they broke one of those over Sting's head. And the people chanted Fire Russo then too. It was fucking rotten. And
is it true that Dixie would get upset when they would chant Fire Russo?
Well, she said that somebody asked her on one of the kayfabe commentaries interviews, said, something about, well, when they chant Fire Russo, why don't you take that to heart? And she'd say, well, that's because when they would chant Fire Russo, half the time it wasn't even his idea. Unfortunately, it actually kind of was. She just either didn't know what his idea was or didn't want to admit what his idea was or didn't know enough about the wrestling business to know that there's a difference between the people that have an original idea for something and the lunatic moron that she had actually fucking writing the television show. So they didn't try to have a stinker, but it turned out that way. If they'd had well, obviously you don't have a Texas death match first after you break up, but you don't have a blindfold match either first after you break up. If they'd had a nice little 3-match series, Storm was already over. Harris would have got over better. This kind of put Harris on the path to no return.
Let's stay in this vein. Our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Anonymous. In November 2006, TNA set an all-time pay-per-view record at the time for the first match between Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle.
Yeah.
Which was basically WWE's Kurt Angle versus the guy that Scott D'Amore pushed as an unbeatable badass for a year and a half and did approximately 60,000 buys.
Yes.
1 month later, thanks to Vince Russo's brilliant writing, the same Joe Angle match set what was close to another all-time record at the time when it did 18,000 buys. I understand Dixie was loyal to a fault, but how did she not look up at that and go, Vince, I don't think it's working, and move on to literally anyone else?
Again, the build of Kurt coming in, former Olympic champion, blah, blah, blah. Joe had been pushed as an as they said, unbeatable monster. They both had, Joe had an MMA flavor to his ring style. Conditions were right. And Dutch Mantell took the lead on that bit of business and built it like a fight with a heavy UFC kind of influence where they would work out on video and they would talk on video and they would be talked about on video, but they didn't actually do angles and physicality. They didn't do preposterous, phony scenarios every week. They didn't get each other beat up every week in some fashion with phony lead pipes or running people over in the parking lot or whatever. It was a build to a fight, and they had a great match that delivered, and that was the biggest pay-per-view that they ever did. Not just at that time, I'm pretty sure it's the biggest pay-per-view they ever did. Afterwards either.
I think so, yeah.
And then immediately, the next, whenever they got the news of what business it had done, then old Shitstain jumped in and started building the rematch for the following month, and they started doing angles and foolishness and bullshit, and they dropped to a third of what it was. And, I mean, you know, within a year or so of that, the TNA pay-per-views were not even tracking. It was so low. It was in the single-digit thousand pay-per-view buys. She didn't know who was doing what, and she believed the shit that he would say to her because he's a professional blamer of somebody else or some other strife or conflict or obstacle or handicap or standards and practices, or they just don't get it, or the guys won't do what I say, or the wrestlers don't want to do what I say because it didn't make any sense, or the fucking producers don't want to do what I say because it don't make any sense, or nobody understands what I'm trying to say. If all of those things wouldn't happen, this would have been perfect. And she didn't fucking know enough to know that he's full of shit. And she instead thought that he had her best interests at heart because he's the one that talked nice to her and told her how great she was and trying to be honest and say you don't need to be involved in this because you don't know what you're doing.
Was he the first one to say she should be on air?
I was not there then, so I cannot say, but I bet you. And it's I mean, that was a seed that was percolating from the time she first got involved with the company for her to be on television. Because I'll never forget most of the time she'd come to the TVs in Florida. Every once in a while she wouldn't be there. Most of the time she would come. One day I'm standing outside. The girls' makeup was in the same building, not the sound stage, but the building where the production meeting and offices and rooms like that were. They had a big room and they set makeup because all the girls need to get made up. The guys, not so much. The announcers would, but nevertheless. So one of the, I can't even remember and it doesn't matter, one of the mid-level production assistant people came in all huffing and puffing. He had just got off the phone. And while I'm standing there going over something with one of the talent and says, Dixie's just called. She was on a plane from Dallas. It had been delayed, so she's going to be late. So she had just called from the plane phone, this production stooge, to go in and make sure that the girl's makeup chair was vacant, was available right at 15 minutes till 7 or what time she was going to come rolling in from the airport. So make sure that none of the girl wrestlers, none of the talent that's on air are in the chair so she can get her makeup done. And I said, what the fuck does she need to get her makeup done for? She's not on television. And he said, oh, but every taping, she goes out and carries the TNA belt out and takes pictures with the fans. So this fucking wannabe Real Housewife of Antioch, Tennessee, I got nothing good to say about Dixie. I never have. She was a complete blithering idiot. And if she did have as interesting a sex life as she's accused to, that may be the only thing about her I like. But otherwise, she was incompetent. She was going to run the girl wrestlers, the Gail Kims and the Angelina Loves and the all the girls on the roster out of the makeup chairs so that she could get there. And she would get her makeup done, and then she'd go out and carry the belt out into the impact zone and take pictures with the fans and thank them for coming in, which is a nice babyface thing to do if you're the promoter, but not when you have to get made up first and it's all about you carrying the belt around. Can you see Christine Jarrett taking a Southern heavyweight title belt away from Lawler? Hold on, I got to go have some pictures taken. I'll be right back. How about Vince? Hey, pal, hold on, we're going to rewrite Seg 4, but I got to go out and do pictures with the fans. Fucking horse-faced douchebag.
Well, what I was going to ask you before, again, going to the loyalty she had for Russo, if let's say somehow the Heyman deal had worked out, or let's say somehow Jim Ross had ended up in Impact, and someone at that level, we know from the Heyman talks, you're dealing with Dixie. Do you think if it wasn't Russo, she would have been that kind of loyal to a Paul Heyman or someone else?
I don't know. Maybe a combination, because Paul Lee, the first thing that he would have done, he would have looked at her like Trump and he's Putin. This is a blithering simpleton that can be swayed by flattery and praise. I will have her eating out of my hand the more things that I say good about her and worse about everybody else, so I can commiserate with her that if she only had the people. Right? He's smart enough to do that, and she would fall for it because she wants to be somebody. JR, when he went down to meet about it, they flew him to Dallas, and he met with the old man, her father, Bob Carter. And I don't think that JR he would have been polite and professional, but I don't think that he would have had the patience to put her over when it wasn't applicable to put her over. And I think he would have probably been more likely to tell her all the shit that she didn't know and suggest that she be an owner and stay out of the workings of the company for the sake of everybody. Whereas Paul would have made her think that she was running everything and that her opinions was highly valued and that she was gorgeous, and then do absolutely nothing that she said, everything that he wanted, and then blame somebody else or made her believe that that's what they had talked about. And then she'd have been confused. So JR would have been too honest. That's why he talked to the father to begin with and didn't want any part of it, because he could see there was no way to do this. And Heyman, whoever he talked to, equally saw that there was no way to do this, but I will take the babyface way out, as we've mentioned, by saying, well, if they give me a piece of the company, I'll do it. But they wouldn't, so he didn't, and he got out of it. But neither one of them would have taken the job, nor would they have been able to have done anything with it because of the other obstacles, her being the big one. And then also everybody in their office was a blithering simpleton. I'm not talking about the wrestling people. They hired interns out of high school and old friends that had done other work. I'm pretty sure that, if you're one of those fucking pink Cadillac makeup ladies, I'm pretty sure you can transition easily into lawnmower repair. But they had a bunch of people that had done some things before, but nothing related to what they were supposed to be doing then. There was a few good people in TV production that the wrestling people had gotten them. And when it came to just hiring regular employees, it was her responsibility. You never heard the girl that was responsible for media buys, supposed to be calling radio stations, getting trades and deals and buying schedules and flights of spots with TV stations and everything. She sounded like she was 12. It sounded like, can you put your mother on the phone, please? I think her name was, I don't know, one of those cute little white people names, where some rich white girl on a fucking soccer team at a prep school. What would her name be? Anyway,
Dixie.
What were you talking about? Dixie. There you go.
Well, one last question on this, and then we'll move on, because you were there before and you were there after. How surprising was it to you that she fell out with Jeff Jarrett? At the time.
At the time, I was surprised because I thought she realized that he was what was keeping things going. I think she thought that the company could survive without Jeff Jarrett, which it has in multiple iterations, but only at great cost of blood and treasure.
It's also survived without air. So
yes. But no, the one thing, I mean, everybody knows the breakup was when Jeff started seeing Karen Angle. Karen and Kurt were having issues, and Jeff and Karen got together, and Jeff had not told Dixie that was true when it was true. She'd asked him, and I guess he said no, but she found out it was, and then she sent him home, and that was the beginning of the end, the long, slow decline. You know, shortly after, they got both Bischoff and Hogan, which, my God, then you're talking about two collegiate professors in backstabbing, lying, and manipulation, dealing with some kid on the corner that's barely able to play tiddlywinks. So they got what they wanted for a while and drained her, and drained Spike quit putting any money in because of they were putting more and more in, getting less and less back. And then once that Hogan and Bischoff had finished emptying her pockets, turning her upside down and shaking her for change, then they started not being able to pay people. Then they started looking for an angel, as dear old Bert Prentice would say. Then they find poor Billy Corgan, and he thinks he's bought the thing, but apparently they were using Nick Goulis's lawyers that he built Jerry Jarrett on in 1977. And it's been the height of TNA was right before and right after the aforementioned sending home of Jeff Jarrett by Dixie Carter, because he almost had it going despite the presence of Shitstain. And then a few things worked that he had in motion afterwards. And then Hogan and Bischoff came in and they switched the TV, and then they pissed off the network, and then they lost all their money. And then it became the beginning of the end. So yeah, I was surprised that they fell out, because he's the one that brought it to her. The company wouldn't be in existence if it wasn't for Jeff and his father. It was obvious who was in charge of the thing and who the last word was. Some knuckleheads may have gone up and asked Dixie questions about yes or no, should I do this or that, but everybody went to Jeff. Nobody that I'm aware of was going to Dixie to get advice on wrestling or angles or what they should be doing on television, or what, maybe they were talking nice to her because she's the boss. But you don't go ask the accountant at the hospital how your fucking heart surgery went. You go to the doctor. That was Jeff Jarrett.
Jim, have you ever thought about how different things would have been if maybe Bob Carter, instead of just throwing money at his daughter, had maybe signed her up for some kind of way of learning a skill like Code Academy?
A skill of any kind. I bet she's probably got a couple of skills, but I bet you can't learn them in school. But I'll tell you one thing. The Code Academy graduates, I've been telling you about them, folks. I mean, to tell you, the people in Code Academy, they're going to be in charge when the entire world goes underground. The people on top of the ground, they'll be in charge, and those are the Code Academy graduates. Folks, don't be enslaved to ignorance. Do not be chained in the bowels of the ship of stupidity. No, because now the Code Academy graduates just made the news this past week. Brian, you heard about it. Tony Khan has found out about the secret plot amongst the Code Academians, and that is to bot his wrestling promotion into existence.
Well, that's not exactly what he said, and he's not accusing Code Academy, and that's not exactly...
No, that's what because see, Code Academy graduates are running the world. They're the ones that are making all the artificial intelligence. They're the ones that are writing all the code. They're the ones that are overthrowing all the governments. They're the ones that are, like I said, when the lizard people are in charge, they're going to be in charge of the lizard people. And what they're warming up on before they undermine governments, before they engage in tactical warfare and wipe entire countries off the face of the planet, they're working on maligning AEW on Twitter. That's right. These are not bots, folks. They are highly skilled individuals. Folks, there's never been a better time to become a bot. And with Code Academy, you can learn to be a bot on your own terms. One of the best ways to succeed in a fast-changing world is to learn how to code. And all these bots, they're experts at it. So Code Academy can tell you where to code and how to do it. And they can tell you where to take your code, too. Whether you're starting from scratch or looking to advance, Codecademy can help you reach your coding goals by maligning and slandering AEW.
No.
Tony Khan may not recognize your full potential, but Codecademy does, folks. With Codecademy, you can learn the technical skills to advance your career. You can start a totally new one, or you can make life miserable for everybody's Adderall-addicted wrestling promoter. Do you want to learn a new skill to build websites, troubleshoot tech issues, transition into a new career, or make fun of botches? Well, over 50 million people already know that Codecademy is the best way to learn to code, and they make the most entertaining accounts on Twitter. That's because Codecademy not only teaches you job-ready coding skills, but also helps you build unique projects for your portfolio, earn certificates, prep for technical interviews, and compile videos of botches of wrestling programs. So again, folks, you can learn coding languages including Python, HTML, Sys, SQL, JavaScript, and more. And you can drive Tony Khan and his father absolutely crazy with your strange takes on AEW programming. You can take Codecademy's programming personality quiz to get tailored career advice. It'll fit you like a glove, or like a suit, or like whatever you put on parts of your body that fits. It's tailored for you.
Could have stopped at glove.
It's tailored for you. We could have gone to condom. I don't know. It'll fit you like a condom. You can get instant feedback. Like, take that thing off. Your code is tested as soon as you submit it, folks, so you always know if you're on the right track. You know, when you submit this code, they've got a button, and they can instantly electrocute you as you sit in your chair if you've done the code wrong, so you'll always know. Folks, you can build your portfolio and get a certificate of completion. It's a giant document you can put on the wall saying that you once completed yourself. You can join the over 50 million people learning to code with Codecademy and see where coding can take you. And as a positive byproduct, you can piss off Tony Khan. Get 15% off your Codecademy Pro membership when you go to codecademy.com and use the promo code EXPERIENCE. That's promo code EXPERIENCE at codecademy.com to get 15% off Codecademy Pro, the best way to learn to code. That's codecademy.com. Promo code EXPERIENCE, EXP. Well, fuck it. If you can't spell experience, how the fuck you going to be a computer programmer? You morons. Codecademy.
Well, Jim, our next question is one that several people have sent in on Twitter and via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. Did you see a recent tweet from Chris Jericho after the Ring of Honor pay-per-view about Tony Khan?
I did not.
Here's a Chris Jericho tweet. 11:49 p.m. April 1st, 2022. Prediction: Tony Khan is going to take over both the sports entertainment and pro wrestling business in North America within the next 5 years. So let it be written, so let it be done. What are your thoughts on Jericho's prediction?
So let it be written, so let it be done. Did he get that from Marvel Comics? Is that something that Odin would have said?
I don't know.
Right when he gave Thor and everybody their marching orders? What, is he worried about his contract and he's trying to start sucking up now? He's going to take over so he's going to beat Vince. Vince, who knows in 5 years if he'll be around, but he'll have either taken over the WWE or bypassed them at this point. Is this what he's saying?
I guess so. I mean, he has Ring of Honor. Impact's a non-entity. Anything else really doesn't matter in the States. New Japan is WWE. I guess he's saying that Tony and whatever his operation will either be bigger than WWE or they're going to take over WWE. I'm not exactly sure.
Okay, Chris, temper your enthusiasm for the taste of that asshole just a bit. I'm not calling Tony an asshole. I'm saying you've got obviously a fucking taste for his asshole because you're kissing it. That even if you're a supporter or you're pulling for AEW, or as Mama Cornette used to say, that's a long road to hoe. So I think you ought to gear that back just a little to something that's possible, foreseeable, doable. Like, you know, you could say he'll be competitive or he's going to make his mark or whatever. But no, he's going to take over the whole thing. He'll have a Tony Khan. If Tony Khan was to take over the entire wrestling industry, what kind of stroke or attack would he have first if he's this fired up, wired up, hopped up and ready to go right now over what he's doing?
I don't know. I don't know who his enemy will be at the time.
You don't even have to have an enemy. You can melt down just from everybody loving you if you're doing too much. I mean, we've seen poor Tony's demeanor lately. He's a little harried as it is, so he's going to take over the. I'm sorry, it's just that no matter who you are or what your hope or aspiration is for Tony Khan's wrestling projects, that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous statement made only to kiss the ass of your boss. Would you not agree?
Oh, I completely agree. Because even if you think Tony could do something here and really take over, or really take the lead from WWE, putting it out there like that, putting it out there when you do it, I think a lot of wrestlers put stuff out there to, in their minds, please Tony. Whether it does or doesn't, or whether Tony sees through it or not is another story. But there are other wrestlers who do similar things.
Well, I
have the greatest boss. I love my boss. He's the best boss. Yeah, okay, give it a break. That's what I think. Jim, another story that has come out the last few days, and I haven't followed it too closely. I have an article here from CagesideSeats.com by Sean Reuter on the injury.
Is he the guy who founded Reuters news service?
I would tend to think not. Otherwise, he probably wouldn't be on Cage Side Seats. He'd probably be on a yacht.
He'd probably be dead, right?
Or dead, I guess, now that we think of it. But this is an article about the injury to Shinjiro Otani. Let me read a little bit here and get your thoughts on it. Our latest reminder of just how little margin for error there is in professional wrestling came from a show held yesterday, as of print time, April 10th, in Tokyo Sumo Hall. During the main event of Sunday's 0-1 show, Shinjiro Otani was facing the promotion's World Heavyweight Champion, Takashi Sugiura, in the main event. The 49-year-old Otani took a German suplex into the turnbuckle, then was unable to continue the match. He was taken out of the building on a stretcher and rushed to the hospital as fans were asked to leave. The referee told Tokyo Sports that while Otani was conscious and able to see and hear, he couldn't move and reported not having sensation in his hands. An update came today from 0-1 president Takahito Kami. Here's a quote. "It hasn't changed. He's conscious, but can't move his limbs. Currently, he's being treated by a doctor. As for the official diagnosis, we are waiting for a reply from the hospital." Jim, I know you're not a big Japanese wrestling fan the last couple of decades, so I don't know how much of Otani's career you would have seen or followed, but have you followed this story at all, and what are your thoughts on another injury, another neck injury, seemingly a spinal injury, I guess we could say, clearly, in wrestling?
Well, I saw the clip of the incident, and I read some of the same stuff that you've just read there. I have not followed Otani. Don't wish him any well. But again, the clip I saw was a guy, he already looked like he was blown up, and they'd been doing the Japanese match where they hit and headbutt and chop each other and boom, boom, boom. And this guy, he doesn't look, I don't know what his current situation is, his training methods. He looked to me like an old, fat Japanese man that 50 years old, and suddenly the guy he's in there with goes behind him, waist locks him, and German suplexes him backwards into the turnbuckles. And apparently, that's what they were trying to do. Now, that would have been the first thing that, you would have learned in wrestling school not to do 40 years ago or 30 years ago or whenever I got into business, or probably any reputable school today, but there ain't that many of them. But now there's a thing where they buckle bomb people. I remember that's what gave Sting a stinger, no pun intended. And
against Seth Rollins, that's right.
Against Seth Rollins, buckle bomb. And that's you're right side up. And your head's supposed to be going over the top of the turnbuckle, if that's done correctly. Still fucked him up. They're German suplexing people where the back of their head hits the turnbuckle. And that was the first thing you used to learn was see what's behind you and make sure you're not doing it. Tommy Young's career as a referee was ended when Tommy Rich grabbed him and started backing up like he was going to argue with him and stumbled and fell backwards and brought Tommy with him. The forehead hit the bottom rope, snapped his neck back. He was done. As a referee, still to this day, if you pat him on the back, he'll get fucking electric shocks down his arms. So they're already doing this stupid shit that there's no call for because it looks dangerous. Imagine that. We'll convince these fucking fans that we've already told in blatant detail how phony all this shit is by doing something really dangerous. And I saw the bump, and it's not a smart thing to do, and it obviously fucked him up, but it wouldn't have been in the top 7 most dangerous looking things I saw on last week's AEW show. It just happened to be the right one. On a guy who's probably had a lot of mileage on his body because of the way they work over there to begin with. And he's 50. Did we mention that? And he didn't look in the greatest physical condition. Maybe I just had a bad camera angle. I'm sorry if I'm maligning a guy, but he didn't look like Nick Bockwinkel 50. He looked more like goddamn Necro Butcher 50. So, again, I don't know it's not surprising anymore. And I don't know what's hard to understand why this is happening. And everybody feels bad about it now, but nobody thought to feel bad about it before it happened when somebody might have said it's a good idea that you not German suplex that guy, or the guy that was getting German might have said it's not a good idea you German suplex me on the back of my head in the turnbuckle. But past that, what are you going to do? So, and it's the whole idea is not to just trade moves on each other that really hurt and or strikes and or whatever and stand there because you have some blithering simpleton idea about you're strong or you're violent or you're whatever because you're standing there letting somebody hit you in a fake fight for real. And the only reason that this stuff gets by in wrestling these days is because it's gone so far with the de-evolution of our business that nobody watching expects it to make sense or to look real. All those people, the 8 million out of 10 million that watched up until 20 years ago, they've all gone because it's insulting for them to watch it now because it's just stupid because it's guys doing shit to each other on purpose for no reason. And now they're all getting hurt and going to the fucking hospital and getting paralyzed. And this guy got paralyzed in Japan. And it wasn't on one of their major television networks. And I'm sure it'll get some news, but probably not front page news in the whole country. They got other shit going on over there these days. And Antonio Inoki or Giant Baba's not involved. What's going to happen when somebody gets paralyzed on live network national TV over here? That'll probably make some news. And there's contracts coming up due with a variety of the companies in the next year or two. So why don't we get back to start telling some stories with matches that they can believe about people they dislike or do like, and make the shit look good and sensible so a casual person could be drawn in, or we can just keep headbutting each other like the geniuses in Japan do until they've all got brain damage. Your thoughts, Brian?
Were you at center stage the night Tommy Young got hurt?
Yes.
Was Tommy Rich impaired?
Probably. He was he in the ring? Was he walking? Was he talking?
Because Tommy Young, I read an interview a long time ago where Tommy Young basically said he thought Tommy Rich was impaired, but they couldn't prove it. So that's why he wasn't able to sue.
It was a clusterfuck all the way around, because that was center stage was a great place to have wrestling, except WCW was constantly screwing something up, either having the wrong equipment come in or the truck wasn't booked. Remember the time that we were supposed to do a TV taping? The Office, the creative team, got there and there were no seats in the building. They were in the middle of renovations.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was concrete ledges with dust on them, and etc. Well, on this night, and Tommy Rich, was he impaired? Probably not. Had he been drinking? I'm absolutely sure he had. Because, like I said, he was conscious and existing in the world, so I'm sure he'd had a few beers. But what happened right before that incident is the lights, the power. Something happened to the power, and all the lights went off for a second. Not all of them. They still had emergency lights on, but the ring lights and all this shit. And everybody's like, what the fuck? And they're in the middle of it. And then Tommy Rich grabs Tommy by the shirt as Tommy Young is pushing him back to argue with him, and Tommy Rich, backing up, stumbles in the dark. and I'm sitting back there because I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? And then down goes the referee. So the lights have gone off, and the heel stumbles and falls, and Tommy Young goes down and fucking is laying there holding his neck. That was an example of TBS television back then. But no, there wasn't any way to prove it. But at the same time, the fact that Tommy Young had to try to sue, contemplate suing, they ended his career and said, well, here's your check for these 2 weeks. Go home. It wasn't his fault. He didn't do anything wrong. Somebody else should have done something, but no.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Brim in Lake Dallas.
Brim
is the name here. I keep hearing stories around my hometown of Lake Dallas about how a well-known Lake Dallas doctor gave the Von Erich boys steroids, and then Fritz ran the doctor out of town because he gave them steroids. Some of the older folks around here thought Fritz had more power than the mayor himself because of who he was. Is there any truth to all of this? I hear so much in my little town every day about the Von Erichs, but these two stories stick out like a sore thumb. I just want to know the truth.
Well, I can neither verify nor deny that specific thing happened. I don't have that knowledge. Was Fritz powerful enough in that part of the country, in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, to get a variety of things done? Yes, especially up in Lake Dallas, because there was Dallas, Texas, downtown Dallas, Texas, Hollywood. There's some big dealers and big players going on, but Fritz had been there for so long, and so many important people, as we've come to find out, were wrestling fans, and then grow up to be in important places. And just from knowing people and doing business, and he paid a lot of money to the state for the Texas, Board of Licensing, their version of the commission. Knew a lot of law enforcement people, knew a lot of politicians. There were things he got. Kerry, that time he got arrested in the airport, right? They got that covered. You got arrested for drugs in the DFW airport.
83, yeah.
That didn't even make the paper.
No, it was him,
right?
It was him, and I don't think they were married yet. Maybe they were. It was him and his girlfriend coming back from Mexico.
Yeah.
And they had tons of drugs on them. And the fans believe that Michael Hayes must have planted it, because there's no way the Von Erichs would do drugs.
Well, no, there was one of those incidents that the fans didn't think anything because it never even made the papers. Fritz got a number of things changed, covered up, modified, whatever. He had that power. And in Lake Dallas, that's out in the suburbs, but there was a lot of heavy people that lived out there too, but that's more like the Hardys being from Western North Carolina, where they're even bigger celebrity. They're not celebrities in Charlotte. They're mega celebrities because they are from and live in a small town, and everybody knows them and have heard all these stories. So the point is, I can't specifically confirm or deny that story, but it would have been within Fritz's power to do some things if he was pissed at somebody. But given the boys the steroids, he ran the doctor out of town. He ought to ran the other people out of town and gave him the really dangerous shit.
There were always rumors that Fritz was actually the one who, and again, I don't know what's true and what isn't, but I'm saying there was always rumors that Fritz was the one who actually got Kevin and Kerry the steroids when they were high school athletes. Did you ever hear that?
Well, again,
and it's people making assumptions based on photos, but it's always, that story's always been out there. I think it may have even been in one of the Observer obituaries.
Well, but think about, did Fritz use steroids? No, Fritz was just a big raw bone fucker. I don't know whether some people would compartmentalize. Well, the heroin and the cocaine and the marijuana, those are drugs, and the pills, those are drugs, but steroids, that's for your body. I don't know whether Fritz was one of those or not. It wouldn't have been hard for the boys to get as highly prominent, celebrity high school and college athletes in that part of the country. It's not like they wouldn't have been able to get that shit anyway, especially back then. And there weren't even any legal penalties for it because it wasn't illegal. And that's, so that's, again, all I remember is I've heard from Gary Hart, and I heard from a few different people that a few people inside the circle, David Manning had kind of put a warning out to Fritz. Gary Hart had actually physically said the words, "The boys are on drugs," and Fritz didn't believe it, dismissed it, didn't want to hear about it, didn't think it was true. So who knows?
Jim, our next question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Charlie in Starkville, Mississippi.
I should have known.
Johnny Gargano recently said he wants to wrestle until he's 40. Gargano said, quote,
"Is he 38 now, I hope?
I want to wrestle until I'm 40, and that's 6 years away.
Oh, boy.
So I only have 5 years to maximize whatever I want to do with this." What are your thoughts on Gargano wanting to retire so early? And do you think this will be a trend with guys that work the style Gargano has his whole career?
Well, actually, Gargano, I haven't seen Gargano do this stupid shit with these double 720-degree cannonballs off the top through a table on the floor. I think it's admirable that anybody wants to retire at a reasonably young age from an endeavor that's hard on your body. I'd, be more than pleased if Gargano had a great body of work that he could look back on, but in my opinion. But I don't argue with him wanting to retire at a reasonable age. Hopefully he has something to fall back on for the second half of his life, because that's something that bites a lot of guys in the ass. The sooner as possible that he can do it and feel good about it, and we don't have to watch him anymore, on our television, I'm all in favor of it.
All right, that's the insight on that.
And here's the thing, guys, I'm happy for somebody that can retire anytime they want to, whether they want to or not. I'm happy that they can if they want to. Because that should be the goal. Then you should be, after all the years of doing this, you should do it or not based on whether you want to still, rather than whether you have to. But that's another reason why I think a lot of these guys are not going to get to the point where they can retire and do it because they want to, because their bodies aren't going to fucking last long enough. And they better hope that they realize that this all could go away tomorrow. They used to say that there was no stability or in the wrestling business of the territory days. There was no stability, nothing to depend on. Nothing was a sure thing. Oh, yeah, there kind of was. There was a sure thing that if you wanted to be in the wrestling business and you didn't like one place or they didn't like you, you had another 20 to go to where you could make kind of a similar living. Now, if the whims of an 80-year-old billionaire or a 35-year-old son of a billionaire bouncing off the walls on the, Adderall or whatever the kids call it, you could have a couple of years, you make a ridiculous amount of money, and then you're fucked. So I would just, if I was any of the guys these days, remember that it's not always going to be that way and plan ahead accordingly.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jamie. Why do you think Rowdy Roddy Piper had so much animosity towards Mr. T? Piper talked negatively about Mr. T in shoot interviews for years. But Mr. T had legitimate credibility as a bouncer and bodyguard.
Oh, Jesus.
As well as being an accomplished high school wrestler.
Oh, God damn it.
He wasn't a 120-pound rapper doing dives by any means. He also went out of his way to protect the business. Go back and check out his interviews and media appearances during the build to WrestleMania 1. He seemed to get legitimately angry at anyone who implied wrestling was phony. It's also worth noting, Piper ended up in Hollywood soon after. And I think that's a good point. It's a good point to the question. For anything, anyone, and any negative stuff about Mr. T usually comes from the guys like Piper and Orndorff who had to work with him, and the mentality of how to work with a celebrity. But it is true, he protected the business. Like, when the Belzer thing happened, he was one of the causes of the goddamn thing.
Well, yeah, but think about this. Mr. T was phonier than the boys, because unlike the boys, Mr. T was a complete gimmick. Nothing about that was real. He wasn't a badass. He wasn't a fighter, a street fighter. He got the bodyguard shit and everything else off of the look, the gimmick. If he had not taken up for the wrestling business being real, then that would have meant that he and Hulk Hogan weren't really winning. All these things can be true. Yes, Mr. T did take care of the business, but not because he was so enamored of the wrestling business. It's because he didn't want to expose his gimmick. And everybody thought that's why it worked and it sold tickets. People thought he was the real deal. And he couldn't admit that he was in a work and still be real. You see where I'm going with that? It would have killed Mr. T too, and yeah. Mr. T was phonier than the boys. At least most of the boys were tough. Orndorff was a badass. David Schultz was going to beat the shit out of Mr. T just for fun, and there wasn't anything they were going to do about it except fire David Schultz.
Well, and also have a team of police officers drag him out of the building.
And have a team of police officers drag him out of the building. The animosity from Piper, wouldn't you have Piper, not only one of the biggest stars in the wrestling business, but he cared about his image also. At that time, you could name on one hand and still have a couple of fingers left over matches that had ever been held in the WWF that were worse than that boxing match with Mr. T and Roddy Piper, right?
That was one of the worst things ever. WrestleMania 2 at the Nassau Coliseum.
Okay, so how do you think Roddy Piper feels when he has to fucking be reminded every day for the rest of his life that he was in one of the most absolute stinkers of all time, and it wasn't his fault?
Turned him babyface with that crowd.
Yes. And so, a lot of the guys, obviously they went with it because it was Vince's WrestleMania push and blah, blah, blah. And it was publicity, but they gritted their teeth and held their nose to do it because Mr. T couldn't work. The shit was not going to look good the more that he did it. And also he was coming in from another business and making more money than any of them had ever made in their lives in the wrestling business in one night that they were the stars of because of the weird confluence of events that they happen to find themselves in. So there was jealousy from people that were not on WrestleMania. There was jealousy from people that were underneath him on WrestleMania. This actor, phony actor, that all he is a fucking gimmick. He's not tough in any way, shape, or form. He's going to come in and make more money than they ever pay us, this motherfucker. with Piper, even though he's making main event money because he's working with him. Now he's got to go out there and try to do something and stink the joint out with this guy. So he's not going to have a lot of fond memories. And from what I recall hearing, besides the fact that Mr. T didn't expose the business or make mockery of it on the air, he was not exactly the most humble and lovable person in the locker room to the way he came off with. He wasn't walking in there as himself and going, "Oh, thank you guys for letting me be a part of this." He's walking in with the chains and the mohawk like he's somehow as badass as these guys are, and they all resented it. Does that sum it up pretty much?
I think so, and you have to think if that would happen today, maybe some of those wrestlers would resent it to the point where they would hire an attorney.
And sue. Is that what you're saying?
And sue.
And sue. And not my sister Sue, the seamstress who sews, but suing in a court of law for misrepresenting a non-tough guy as a tough guy. I can't think of anybody better to take that case than this man.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
Oh boy, what a drumbeat there, folks. A little known fact, that is the marching band of the high school in War, West Virginia that laid that drum track down specifically for the Stephen P. News spot. NewLawOffice.com, the place to go. 888-692-8084, the number to call. And the only thing we need is you, the plaintiff, as I used to refer to one of my ex-wives. You, the plaintiff, ladies and gentlemen, need to retain the services of New Law Office, Stephen P. New, to navigate you through the treacherous legal waters of the American jurisprudence system. He can deliver you safely to the other side, and you'll have to pay the ferryman, but you'll pay him out of the huge judgment that he has obtained for you against the people who have harmed you, damaged you, infringed or endangered you, or in otherwise made you an unhappy camper. If you've got a legal issue, as we've said before, the consigliere of the cult of Cornette, Stephen P. New himself, and his minions at New Law Office, they are the man and women and children and all kinds of people to talk to in pluralness. They can to be talked to. Without further delay, ladies and gentlemen.
They can be talked to.
They can be taught, and they will answer back in English or another language that you are conversing in, because that's the kind of people they are. And we've even mentioned before, we've gotten so many tweets and so many emails that Stephen himself actually called them back to aid with their problem. He may have a problem doing that for the next couple of weeks. He's in a couple of major trials, but more judgments are being handed down, and Stephen P. New is getting more people the compensation they deserve. You can be one of those more people if you call 888-692-8084 or visit newlawoffice.com.
Let's get a few more questions here, Jim, before we wrap things up, before Stephen P. New sues me for not getting enough questions here on the show. Several people have sent this one in. I'll read this question, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Tony in Sevierville, Tennessee.
Sevierville.
What did I say?
You said Sevierville. Sevierville.
Let's see how severe this question is.
It's right next to Pigeon Forge, down the road from Dollywood, and a little bit further away from Gatlinburg.
Hello, Jim and Brian. Hope all is well. I would love to hear your thoughts on the recent article about Noelle Foley being upset at The Undertaker for not mentioning her father, Mick Foley, during his Hall of Fame speech. I myself thought it was puzzling, and can understand her frustration. I'm a huge fan of both Mick and The Undertaker. However, I myself would have loved to hear what he would say during his speech about their time in the business together. It's a Clunky sentence because it's capitalized in the middle of it for no reason. Anyways, hope all is well with both of you. Stay safe and best of health to you and your families. Thank you, Tony. But have you seen anything about this? And I have the actual tweet here.
Well, actually, no. I mean, we remarked at the time when we reviewed the Hall of Fame that I said he didn't mention Mick. And that was, when a number of people I've seen mention that he didn't mention Mick. And, people say, well, it's, live TV, the awards. I think, wasn't it Cactus? Somebody said that Cactus forgot to thank his wife on his speech.
That's what his daughter actually said. To be fair, my dad did forget to mention my mom in his Hall of Fame speech.
But the point is, I would thought that would have been, even if he wasn't there as a visual reminder, when anybody thinks about great WWF moments, Undertaker, Mankind, Hell in a Cell, that's one of the, Undertaker had a lot of high points, but that has to be one of the most memorable. So I was like, and they were matched together perfectly, and they went back to it on several different occasions. So that was puzzling to me, but I thought maybe just an accidental omission. What did Noelle say?
Well, what she said on social media was, that was a great speech, but I'm very surprised there was not one single mention of my dad and their legendary matches together. Obviously, I understand it's difficult to fit everything into one speech and remember every single person you wanted to mention, but it just would have been really nice to hear my dad's name mentioned.
Well, yeah, and she's not, she's correct, and she's not being impolite or confrontational or whatever about it. And that's, maybe Taker feels bad that he just blanked and didn't. It wouldn't be hard to fit everything in that speech he gave. He spoke for an hour, for fuck's sake. I don't think anybody was wrapping him up. You raised the question at the time, I think, is Mick on the outs with the WWE? I can't imagine they would have told The Undertaker not to mention Mick Foley's name. Stranger things have happened. But maybe it just was an oversight, but I'm thinking, God, that's a big blank. That's like me forgetting to mention the Rock and Roll Express.
Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Jordan, Manchester, England. There has been a renewed interest and fascination amongst the wrestling fans by the bizarre WrestleMania 15 Rage Party. Vince dancing awkwardly to chocolate salty balls. Shane seemingly drunk out of his mind. Stone Cold arguing with crew members. Strange stooge comedy bits. The whole thing looks like a nightmare and feels incredibly cursed. Does Jim have any memories or stories from this event?
15 was in 1999 or 2000.
99, I believe.
Where 98 was with Austin and Tyson in Boston. Where was 99?
I don't know. Off the top of my head.
Well, you got a Google machine in front of you, don't you? The point is, WrestleMania 99 was in, I guess, obviously they usually are the last weekend of March or the first weekend of April. And I already had made plans.
Philadelphia.
Okay, Philadelphia. I had just made plans. I was going to be moving to Louisville, July the 1st. This was known to me at that point. I believe I'd already mentally checked out. I remember going out with Dennis Coralluzzo and eating after that event because we were in Philly, but I don't remember what was on that fucking show. I really don't. What was the question again?
It was about this party for WrestleMania that I don't remember either. So if you don't remember it and I don't remember it, I think that's the end of the question.
They were right in the middle. This was 6 months before Shitstain would, turn tail and run and fuck Vince around and run off without telling him in person. And they were in the middle of just they were lost in the weeds of the Attitude Era at that point. So anything could happen. Maybe they were doing Mexican black tar heroin on camera. I don't know.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Rich in Rawlins, Wyoming. I recently stumbled on a bunch of matches involving the New Zealand Militia including against the Midnight Express. I was wondering if Jim could provide some insight and some stories on this team that time and history have seemed to have forgotten.
Well, I don't think everybody's forgotten them. The New Zealand Militia was Jack Victory and Rip Morgan. Jack Victory had worked in World Class and Louisiana. He was partners at one time with John Tatum when they were managed by Missy Hyatt. He was a big kid. He was from New Jersey, and his real name was a tongue twister, something like Reininghaus or something. But he had broken in the mid-'80s, and he was a big, tall kid, good size, blonde, threw a nice punch, could work, no bodybuilder physique to speak of, but in the territories, that wasn't necessary. And I guess with the modern fans maybe know him a little bit more, Paul Lee liked him and used him in ECW, Jack Victory. Of course, Jack Victory was the guy that filled in for Dennis in the original Midnight Lose or Leave Town match when Dennis Condrey found out we were getting our angle was getting fucked and decided he'd fuck first and didn't show up for the blow-off. Rip Morgan was the flag bearer at one time for the Sheep Herders, Butch Miller and Luke Williams in Crockett. And then he was legitimately from New Zealand, had the accent. And I think, wasn't he Butch's nephew for real?
Oh, I never heard that. I don't know.
Or was it, he was related to somebody in some way, I thought. This has been 30 years, right? But anyway, they were a good team. They used them in the TBS WCW era, 89, 90-ish, as the New Zealand Militia because of Rip's previous association. And then Jack Victory had done flag bearing too. Come to think of it, hadn't he? He'd been a flag bearer at one point. So basically, since they both had connections to the Sheep Herders, they became the New Zealand Militia, even though Jack Victory was from New Jersey. And at one point, to try to give Herd more of his entertainment that he wanted, like the WWF, instead of doing what we did better that people watched us for, poor old Lord Littlebrook, bless him, became the manager of the New Zealand Militia. So then you've got a guy from England managing a guy from New Zealand and a guy from New Jersey as a New Zealand Militia in beefeater outfits like the fucking 1800s. This may be, now that I'm saying this out loud, why history and time have forgotten this team. But they were both nice guys, and we worked with them a few times when we were babyface in between the original Midnight angle and turning back heel on the Dynamic Dudes, and mostly television matches, some house shows, and nice and easy, nothing to get all upset about. But Jack Victory's the one, he helped me move. He was working Dallas with us when I moved to Atlanta to start working for Crockett. And he came over and helped me get all my stuff in my U-Haul and bid me a fond farewell. He was waving when I pulled out. And then I stopped 100 miles down the road and realized that he had tied the chain up that was holding the U-Haul trailer on the back of my car. He'd left too much slack in it. It had drugged the ground and wore in half. So I had to buy a fucking master combination lock to lock the two links of the chain together and keep it off the ground. But I didn't charge him anything for that.
All right, Jim, our next question sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Scott the Rock in Delaware. I felt compelled to send in a question in reference to the most recent JCE episode.
Okay.
As a fence installer, I couldn't help but to ask you guys to elaborate further about the boys in the locker room not being fond of fence installers like me. You guys blew it off as something most fans wouldn't get or care about, but I was on the edge of my seat waiting to hear the story, since that means I've got heat with the boys. Not cool. Anyway, good luck on your massive, obnoxious fuck you buy fence, Corny.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it's not now. Don't worry about it now. The guys in current modern day wrestling are not mad at you now. But in the territory days, they hated the fence builders. Brian, should I let the fence installer know what a fence builder was in those days?
I think so.
Okay, if you came into territory and you became overly fond of one of the rats in one of the towns, and you attempted to, as they used to call it, build a fence around her by trying to convince her to quit fucking the other boys and just fuck you. That was called fence building. And it was highly frowned on by everybody else in the locker room, especially if the person doing it was fancying themselves a ladies' man and was also setting a bad precedent of whining and or dining and or fawning over said rats, because then they were establishing, much like the same thing they're doing today with the style that they're working, they're establishing a harder precedent for folks to follow after them because they have to take a bigger bump or have a harder chair shot or a more dangerous fall or whatever. You would have to go to farther lengths and be more potentially, you might have to actually spend some money, or you might have to call on the phone regularly or go to some more lengths that you normally had to because of their affections and attentions paid toward that particular girl in that particular town. So fence building was probably some of the worst heat that you could get, especially if the girl was popular and or if she was telling everybody else how that she was getting treated versus how they were getting treated. It would lead to heat on the other members of the roster. It was community property, I guess is what the girls were community property.
I hate to put it that way, but I think it is important.
No, that's the way the boys were looking at it, is the girls were community property and no one should cut off access based on their personal picadillos. However, there's also the situation where the other girls would then, and there were rat fights, because if one girl landed an accomplished fence builder, then the other girls were pissed off either because they wanted that fence builder or because the guys that they liked weren't trying to build a fence, and then it caused all kinds of problems. Then you had arguments between the guys and the girls, and you had fights in the bathroom between the girls and the girls. Go ahead.
Was Eddie Gilbert a fence builder in Mid-South?
Next question.
Okay.
No, he just built the fence around. She was his first wife was actually an employee. So
she was an employee.
Well, she was selling merchandise. She was working the merch table.
Oh, okay.
So he technically didn't take her out of the circulation like that.
What I was going to say before is I think it's important to note that the time period we're talking about, it's either weekly or bi-weekly or at the most every 3 weeks that wrestlers are returning to the same town, seeing the same people over and over again.
Oh, yeah. Like it's supposed to be. You go to the same town every week. You wrestle in the same arena, the same 4,000 or 5,000 people or whatever are there. You stay in the same hotels. You stop at the same exit on the interstate, and the girls go to those same places specifically to go and see you when you stop there. It was a pattern. It was a habit. You could be a mile away from the liquor store or fast food place or the rest stop or stopping area, and you could rattle off the name of 10 or 12 people that would be there by the time you got there, and they'd all be there.
Terry Taylor?
Well, see, here's the thing. Terry I'm not saying that I was around to witness this in person, but Terry had the talent of making all of the women feel like they were the only one in the world to him at that particular moment. But since, as Dundee said one time, Terry, if you busted your head open, little pussies would fall out. He put a lot more effort into it than a lot of guys. Now, Dundee said that back in Memphis. That's even before he got to Louisiana. Yep, Taylor, if you busted your head open, little pussies would fall out.
I hate to use the term rats because it's so looked down upon today, but you brought up rat fights. Do you remember any of those? Or any instances that were like a big story in the locker room?
Well, no, it wasn't like stop the presses. Let's, concentrate on this at the sake of all else. But no, there were times where girls would get in fights with each other because of who one was seeing that the other one was seeing, it was sort of like the drama they try to pass off on NXT. It wasn't really that interesting, except if they actually did get into a fucking hair-pulling Donnybrook, and then you just had to sit because you couldn't take sides. And then also, if you cared about who won a fight between the girls, well, then that means that you have an emotional attachment, and that could get around. So, but there were sometimes people got impolite with each other when they had crossed lines of this guy's mine or that one's yours, and a lot of times if the guys, especially younger guys who were lower on the totem pole, would be more respectful, if for example, if we went to Virginia, because there was a crew in Virginia, Hampton and Norfolk and Richmond that were the Virginia wives for the guys in the territory, because especially in the days before Crockett started his expansion, they'd be up there for 3 nights in a row every couple of weeks. So all the top guys had regular girls, and the other guys, when they came in the territory, they were alerted to that and didn't go try to jump in because it was more of a formal arrangement. But every once in a while, plus if you were friends of one of the guys, then that didn't count if you were with that girl because you were friends and it was all friendly. It was so much easier back then.
Sounds like it was something back then, but let's get at least one more question here this week, Jim, before we wrap things up. This one, sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Jason in New York City. Wanted to ask you if you heard Bret Hart's statement that Barry Horowitz should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, and do you think Barry Horowitz deserves to be in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I see why Bret is saying that, because Barry Horowitz, specifically him, and peripherally, a lot of guys in his position helped make the stars. Barry Horowitz was an excellent wrestler, and he was in good shape, and he never got the spot or the push where he was going to be a main event guy all across the board in the business, and possibly that maybe wasn't his destination anyway. But he was easy to work with and a nice guy and no issues, and guys like that should be rewarded in some fashion. Should he be in the WWF Hall of Fame? I mean, compared to a lot of the other people, especially the celebrity wing or some of the other people in there, probably yes. But if you're talking about should he be in a legitimate wrestling Hall of Fame, that's a good question. Because in baseball or basketball or football or any other Hall of Fame, just your statistics, your points, your career, your scoring, it's easy to quantify stuff like that. Barry's biggest contribution to the wrestling business was he lost tons of matches, but to do that to get other people over that would be put in positions to draw everybody money. So as one of the best to ever do that, maybe, yes, he should be in a Hall of Fame. But then again, it's still, should you be in a Hall of Fame noted for losing a lot of matches, but that was what your job was. It's something to talk about over the water cooler.
Well, Jim, before we wrap things up and get a song or two, just a quick update here at the end of the show on something you brought up much earlier. The new head, I believe, of what will be TBS, or the head of TBS, is a woman named Kathleen Finch. I'm looking at her bio here on the corporate website for Discovery.
Hello, Mrs. Finch.
Finch, before TBS, was the Chief Lifestyle Brands Officer overseeing HGTV, Food Network, TLC, Investigation Discovery, TRVL, I guess Travel Channel.
Travel.
OWN, that's the Oprah Channel, amongst others.
Sounds like the perfect audience for AEW fans. They watch all those programs.
Finch also supervises the Digital Lifestyle Studios Group, responsible for producing video and social content in support of Discovery's digital business. Goes through some of the ratings success. If I scroll down, before joining HGTV, Finch spent 7 years as the senior vice president of programming at the Food Network, where she developed long-running series such as Unwrapped, the Food Network Challenge, and Ace of Cakes. And it goes into her career there. So purportedly, whatever you want to say, this will be the woman in charge of the network that is the home of AEW.
Well, it's reportedly, not purportedly. That's what's going to happen. And we've talked about this in the past, and I've gone on ad nauseum about how easy it is to lose your television and the wrestling business. What's happened when other promotions in other time periods have lost television or got sideways with their network or the broadcaster or whatever. And this, again, yes, Tony Khan, co-owner, part owner of a pro football team that his father owned or whatever. The point is, he's in the pro football business. They're big-time players. They've got, the football team or the soccer team, as we Americans say, over in the United Kingdom. They deal with network television executives and cable TV people. And Tony Khan is able to go to Kevin Riley because they're at a fucking cocktail party. And, of course, since it's been 20 years, Kevin Riley was astonished to know that TBS once owned Vince McMahon's only competition. Well, we could do that again. Oh, you could? Well, let's talk about it. It was that easy because here it's guys out someplace talking about something on TV. Now we think Turner Broadcasting or Turner Television or whatever, we think that was big. Now they're so big, they're a giant multiple conglomerate with network after network after network and holding. And over here in the corner is TBS and TNT. So what Mrs. Finch is, the Kathleen Finch, is now it's not going to be Kevin Riley. It's not even going to be the guy that replaced Kevin Riley. It's going to be a woman whose credits include the Travel Channel, Oprah Winfrey, Home and Garden, and Food Network. I don't hear any sports. I don't hear any fights. I don't hear any men's activities. And I know they're not going to completely strip TBS and TNT down of all of their professional sports contracts and everything they show in order to put on a touch of brandy or a spot of brandy or a shot of brandy or whatever the fuck. But it doesn't help you when the person in charge of programming, whether they're the popular station or the popular programs or the unpopular programs or the proven whatever, it doesn't help you when the person in charge of that programming probably at least has a personal disdain, if not an active dislike, for the kind of programming that they're going to inherit that somebody else put in place for them. And then they start looking for excuses like the naysayers did in Turner Broadcasting the last time. The ink wasn't dry on them buying Crockett Promotions, and there were people in Turner that said, wrestling? Fuck, we got to find some way to get rid of that shit. Until finally a guy came along that was in charge and said, one thing that'll never be on my network's fucking wrestling. And it wasn't. And I heard stories then of all of the comment, and have heard stories since of the comments that people made at the time inside Turner that was just wringing their hands that they had wrestling, that they owned the company and wasn't just showing it, that they didn't even want to do that on television. So now, conversely, while you've got this activity going, hey, maybe she used to be a wrestling fan. Maybe Kathleen Finch was a rat in Louisiana.
Oh, come on. Don't do that.
We don't know.
She doesn't deserve that.
We have no, I'm not saying she was. I'm not saying she wasn't. I'm saying we don't know. We have no idea. She might be the biggest pro wrestling fan in the world. She might watch Japanese tapes all day long. She might love to see people stand there and invite each other to fucking headbutt them and chop them while they bleed all over the place. She might be, but she might not be. And then she might say, if she saw, for example, if she's doing homework on the networks that she's about to take over, let's say she's home on Friday night with the cat, her daughter, if she has one, or kids, if she has one, I'm sure if she's married, whatever. And she turns on one of her networks, and here are the announcers screaming, "It's a bloodbath," while this fucking guy's spurting blood and this other guy's biting the wound and scraping it before they put each other through some furniture. And she's going, what the fuck is this? And then she delves into this wrestling thing a little deeper and finds out, oh, yeah, on the other show, they just had a guy broke his neck on live television. And then she's going to hear the potty mouth, the Tourette's syndrome that Jericho's leading the charge on, but that everybody has to say shit, son of a bitch, and goddamn
prick
on their program in order to sound grown up and real. And then she's going to be, what the fuck are we doing? Maybe she'll just make changes. Maybe she won't cancel maybe she'll just bring, I don't know, add to the announcing team on Rampage, Lily Tomlin on color. Or maybe she'll hire Brandy back without Cody to bring a shot of Brandy back as a 30-minute series instead of half an hour of guys kicking each other in the fucking balls. Do you think Kathleen Finch is going to be a pro wrestling fan, or is she going to be purely about the ratings and the money, or is she going to be someone who is incensed at the low-class programming with the blood and the cussing and the spurting about and say, we need to fucking, what would Oprah say? We need to get this shit off our air, even if it does draw ratings. Because again, as we know, wrestling ratings are not looked at in the same way as ratings of other programs because there's still a stigma coming from television people about wrestling that the wrestling business over the last few years has done nothing to dispel. Vince does. Vince has made it so squeaky clean you can't fucking fart on television, but the rest of the business has gone the other way and done meaningless blood angles with meaningless underneath talent instead of saving it where it would have some impact and it was a calculated risk. Tony's just, they're bleeding and fucking and cussing all over the place over there. And the fans may like it, but the fucking programmers may not. Go ahead.
It could be a little bit of a mix and kind of a USA Network situation where it's, we like the ratings, we like how much money the show makes, especially because it's an inexpensive deal, relatively, the AEW deal with TBS. But we also want to give you notes. We also want to review what you're going to have on the air. That's what I'd be afraid of more than outright cancellation.
Yeah.
Is all of a sudden the executive wanting to be a part of the creative process. Because that's one of the things that people don't talk about hurting WWE. They always want to just blame Vince. But that is one of the big things that hurt WWE was USA Network wanting to be involved.
Yeah. Characters welcome. Well, not at my house. Bonnie Hammer always had ideas and notes and memos and things you could do or things you couldn't do. And before that, remember, I reprinted one of the TBS memos from 1989 in the Midnight Express scrapbook, where they said, there will be no more gratuitous violence on this television program, a show about gratuitous violence. No hitting or kicking or choking or beating or whatever the fuck they said. They did that before. I'm sure they'll do it again. USA has done it with WWE. Unless you were just... The territory wrestling programs in the 70s and 80s were mostly bulletproof because there were the highest rated program in the market and there were only 3 or 4 stations. And the only time that the station ever got a complaint was if the heel said something and then the promoter could just fire the heel. Otherwise, they were pretty much bulletproof. Now is a different story. and the wrong person seeing the wrong thing, or the wrong thing happens on the show that leads to bad publicity. Imagine if Kathleen Finch had been the one watching when they went to the pizza cutter shot with the bank-addicted drug robber and old Moxley the plumber. She may have taken that a little bit differently. The needless injuries, the needless gruesomeness on television with no upside because you're not saving it and doing it in just the right spot, and new programming people always make me nervous about wrestling. So we'll see what happens. But in a year or 2 years or 6 months or whenever, mark this down in your little black book wherever you keep it, Brian, that I said this. We'll see what happens. Home and Garden.
Home and Garden.
Maybe that's Moxley has a future as a landscaper on the Home and Garden Network.
Well, we shall find out. But, Jim, let's get a song or two before we wrap things up here this week. Let's go to this song, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from CR in CBNL, Canada. Let's go to this.
We are the Jericho Appreciation Society. God save Donald Trump, vodka and anxiety. We are the Desperate Man Appreciation Society. God save Just for Men and all the different varieties. Preserving the hairline from being exposed. Protecting the waistline of Jericho. Society. God save clinging on to any notoriety. We are the Sports Entertainer Consortium. God save Wrestling Biz, fresh from the crematorium. We are the Winnipeg English-speaking vernacular. God save the Botox man, keeps him smooth like Dracula. We are the internet, persecution affinity. God save the Observer, its readers and their virginity. We are the podcast condemnation affiliate. God save flat earthers, conspiracies and idiots. Preserving the hairline from being exposed. Protecting the waistline of Jericho. Everybody! We are the Jericho Appreciation Society. God save Donald Trump, vodka and anxiety. We are the Desperate Man Appreciation Society. God save Just for Men and all the different varieties. G-F-Y, God save the J-A-S.
Ipso fatso.
Ipso fatso, there it is. One of my favorite Kink songs. We are the Village Green Preservation Society, turned into the Jericho Appreciation Society. Any thoughts, Jim?
That was brilliant. Wonderful lyricism, very cunning linguist there on the tune. I rated that very highly.
All right, let's get at least one more here this week. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Brett in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
I was working in Stamford early one morning when he appeared behind me without warning. A man who used to strut and kick, but now he was wearing some lipstick.
It was McMahon.
It was Vince McMahon,
Vincent McMahon.
inventor of SummerSlam.
It was McMahon.
He hates the Macho Man.
Vincent McMahon.
I gazed at him, somewhat frightened. This aged, wrinkled, Tuesday Night Titan. He gave me a creased and sour frown and said, "Hey, pal, watch your pronouns."
It was McMahon.
He fired Shane McMahon.
Vincent McMahon.
Where's Linda McMahon?
It was McMahon.
Off to Florida she ran.
Mr. McMahon.
This ghostly, blank-eyed apparition then approached me with suspicion. He leaned in on his wobbly leg and said, "Hey, pal, have you seen my egg?"
It was McMahon.
It was Vince McMahon.
Vincent McMahon.
He screwed the hit man.
It was McMahon.
He invented the repo man.
Mr. McMahon.
He looked confused and asked sincerely, "Where is young Austin Theory? If you see him, bring him to me. He's coming back with my dry turkey."
It was McMahon.
It was Vince McMahon,
Vincent McMahon.
inventor of SummerSlam.
It was McMahon.
He hates the Macho Man.
Mr. McMahon.
Grabbing my shoulder, his eyes grew runny and asked me, should wrestling be funny? He sought my advice and even wept, but he grimaced when I said the name Cornette.
It was McMahon.
It was Vince McMahon.
Vincent McMahon.
He fired Shane McMahon.
It was McMahon.
Where's Linda McMahon?
Mr. McMahon.
Off to Florida she ran. Now he wanders, still getting richer, consoling himself with Bruce Pritchard. Shane and Levesque have let me down, but Bruce, you'll always be my clown.
It was McMahon. Mr. McMahon. It was McMahon.
It was McMahon.
Well, there it is. Brett
Hey, wait a minute.
in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
Hey, not everybody has to be a musical prodigy to contribute. Just witty. And that was witty.
Fantastic job there. We're going to end on that because we're not going to top that
Yeah,
this week.
yeah.
With that, Drive-Thru is closed. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope those two songs made up for the dreck that was this week's Drive-Thru, but of course we'll be back next week with another Drive-Thru and this weekend on the Jim Cornette Experience, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Get access to the archive of the Drive-Thru and the Experience by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Cornette. For $5 a month, you get access to the archive going back to the beginning in 2013. Patreon.com/Cornette. Of course, subscribe to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, approaching 300,000 subscribers. Subscribe today and see full episodes, clips of episodes, and omnibus collections, all with the very popular and exclusive Travis Heckel artwork. If there's something you hear on the show that you want to share, go to the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com or available wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Of course, what is it? Action Figure Armageddon at Cornette's Collectibles at JimCornette.com. What's going on over there?
Almost all the fighting is over with now. There's just a few skirmishes and a few brush fires, but you can still get the Jim Cornette commentator playset while they last at JimCornette.com.
Of course, the Drive-Thru is brought to you by the Law Office of Stephen P. New, 888-692-8084. Get even with Stephen at newlawoffice.com. But until next week on the Drive-Thru, and this weekend on the Jim Cornette Experience, for Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!